meeting of Town Council and the Planning Commission on Wednesday, October 27th. Welcome. Let's start with roll call. Sharon?
Yes. Councilmember Alves?
Here.
Councilmember Warnikoff?
Here.
Councilmember Richards?
Here.
Vice Mayor Hughes?
Here.
Mayor Derwin?
Here.
Planning Commissioner Golden?
Here.
Commissioner Haskell? Commissioner Targ? Vice Chair Koffsill?
Here.
Chair Taylor?
Present.
Thank you, Sharon. It looks like we have a quorum. Oral communications. This is the time in the evening when you can speak to something that's not on the agenda, and you can speak for up to 3 minutes. Does anyone have something they'd like to speak to under oral communications? Sharon?
Yes. We have 7562.
7562?
Yes.
Good evening, Mayor Derwin, council members, and planning committee members, as well as staff. I would like to use my 3 minutes. First of all, I would like to, my name is Caroline Vertonghen. Everybody knows my phone number now, ends in 7562. But anyway, so I would like to make a correction to the attendance. I participated at the previous council meeting, October 13th, and to show you an example, I made some comments, page 11, which is also referenced as page 19. I was wondering if the town council and staff can explain why they would like to extend again to have remote meetings as is allowed under the law. I've seen that we spend a lot of money on disinfecting the buildings and ordering plexiglass. Everybody else is in business, and I really would like to hear some reasoning why we're still extending this. Third, I would like to understand, so we had a conference with legal counsel on the 13th, that was before the town council, and usually we have a right to understand, there's usually a disclosure of what the outcome was of that meeting. I don't know if that is no longer available. And then last, I would like to know, why are we no longer saying the Pledge of Allegiance before every meeting? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolyn. As you know, we can't really take action or have a discussion about comments under oral communications, but I can tell you that we aren't doing the Pledge of Allegiance because we're virtual, and it would be hard to do. Are there other members of the audience who would like to speak?
Rita Gomez.
Rita?
Yes, good evening. Hello, Father Martin and Patrick. It was really wonderful seeing the two of you at the blessing of the new employee buildings yesterday. I mean, you guys have to go and see this. It's incredible. A family can actually live in these places. The rooms are large. There's balconies. There's reeds in the metalwork. I mean, it's just really beautiful and a great addition to our town. More in line of what you see when you drive around beautiful Portola Valley. And I hope everyone gets a chance to see it. But thank you for the invitation. And it's really beautiful. Compared to some of the other things that are in the pipeline, this should be an example of what we should strive for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Sharon?
Bob Turcott.
Bob Turcott?
Thank you. I'd like to follow up on the discussion that took place at the last council meeting about SB 9, which will allow 4 homes on lots zoned for a single family. While the staff report noted that areas can be excluded as needed for public safety, neither staff's written report nor its oral presentation described what is required in order for the town to exercise its authority and responsibility for safety. That task fell to a resident, and I wonder why that is. Why is it that staff did not deem the required mechanism for excluding unsafe areas as worth presenting to the council? Why is it that it was a resident, not staff, that raised this issue and suggested a particular solution? As you learn from the resident, in order to protect us from unsafe development, the town must establish written objective standards by which to assess the safety of a proposal. I suggested that NFPA 1140 be adopted because it provides an objective, science-based approach to evaluating safety on a parcel-by-parcel basis. At the meeting, Fire Marshal Bullard phoned in to correct Councilmember Richards' mistaken understanding of current standards regarding building separation. The evidence is overwhelming that it is radiant heat and building separation that are the main drivers of the destruction of whole neighborhoods that we've seen in recent years. That's why NFPA standards now call for 30-foot separation regardless of internal sprinkling. Home hardening and vegetation management are not enough. The bigger issue here, though, is why did our fire marshal have to sit in the queue along with residents with his virtual hand raised in order to make a point about safe development? Why did the town council not insist that immediately following the SB 9 presentation, it hear directly from our fire marshal for an update on the state of our fire risk and how this risk will be impacted by 4 homes on single-family parcels? Why did the council not insist on having an opportunity to question the fire marshal directly regarding safe implementation of SB 9? Why does the council, which has no experience in fire suppression or fire prevention, believe that it knows what the current standards and best practices are, or that staff is qualified to inform it? Despite empirical evidence that the RENA methodology excessively burdened high-hazard communities, and despite confirmation by an ABAG senior planner that our fire risk was not taken into account in determining our RENA, the council decided not to appeal. In July, the council adopted ADU ordinance amendments that allow construction in high-hazard areas of structures that don't conform to basic NFPA standards, despite language in state laws that makes it clear that this compromise on safety wasn't necessary. Will the council's implementation of SB 9 be its 3rd strike since the spring? Will it position Portola Valley to exclude SB 9 from unsafe areas, or will it continue to pretend that densification in the WUI has no effect on safety?
Is that the end?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak from the public?
Ronald Eastman.
Ronald Eastman.
Okay. Hello. Hi. I just want to comment on the proposal that was one of the options that was discussed on the October 18th ad hoc committee, during the ad hoc committee meeting. So I particularly R3. The R3, the proposal to turn my neighborhood into high density housing would be just so destructive of the environment that we invested in years ago when we moved here, and also it's and it would put the burden. The burden would fall on the people that live in this neighborhood, and that's just that is a burden that should be borne by the entire community. If you're hell bent on turning Portola Valley into Cupertino, then the pain should be spread all around. There's no reason to ghettoize the poor people who will be moving to Portola Valley in the Nahor's Triangle. And that's the way I feel about it. And I don't understand why you're not all fighting this, just like Bob just said. This is, I just don't understand it. This is wrong. This is the wrong place to be solving the housing ills of the state. I'm a big believer in planning, and I care very much about housing affordability, but I don't see solving it in Portola Valley And I'm not trying to be a NIMBY, but you know, it just doesn't make sense. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other hands up? Sharon?
There are no other speakers.
Okay, I had two.
Sorry,
Oh, there's one.
hand was just raised.
Okay,
Christy Corley.
Christy Corley.
Thank you. I am big on protecting the environment, and I have some questions hope to be answered either at another time or now. And that is, what does SB 9 do with CEQA? What does SB 10 do with CEQA? How will we protect our environment that we care about? And how many duplexes on a lot split with SB 9? Can you elaborate, please? Thank you.
Okay, as you know, we cannot elaborate, but I have taken down your question and I will get answers for you. Are there any other people who wish to speak?
Through the chair, I will say that those questions were answered at the last discussion on SB 9, if the speaker wants to review that meeting and the staff report.
Thank you, Cara. Oops, I see another hand up.
Monica Cheney.
All righty, Monica Cheney.
Hi, everybody. Monica Cheney here. Ron, it was good to hear your voice out there. It's been too long. Anyway, speaking of the point just made by town legal counsel that if a citizen would like to go back and refer to the minutes of a meeting to go understand what staff said about SB 9, I'd really like to request that the meeting minutes of the ad hoc housing committee also are put into a format where there are substantive minutes provided rather than just sort of the headers of the subjects covered. I believe that is the standard practice of most committees in town. And I find that it is extremely difficult to go through a 3-hour YouTube video to try to catch the topics that are covered on something as detailed as housing and the housing element. So I'd really like to request that those things do get put into more detailed minutes. I'd also like to add that I think it's really important that both the council and the planning commission give an opinion about or explore legal information about whether or not SB 9 can simply be the very mechanism by which we will comply with our planning obligation under RENA to provide 253 units. Because it seems to me that the current state of SB 9, until it is litigated, satisfies any and all requirements we have under RENA for planning to have 253 extra units. We do not need to have additional high density housing in new areas of town or in particular parcels, for example, the Stanford Wedge project, when we already have this SB 9 coming down the tunnel. And lastly, if I'm still under 3 minutes, I think we should fight SB 9 till we go, till we die. This is craziness. We're losing all local control. And I think it would be really helpful to explore what litigation avenues we have and whether we can contact other towns and communities to join together. Also, whether our local things like the neighborhood Westridge community or Portola Valley Ranch CCNRs can be used to our advantage, because I believe that there are many of those throughout town. I'm wondering if that's another legal hook. I'd just like to see Portola Valley looking to keep local control, which it does not seem like there's a lot of alarm that I'm hearing about when I listen to town meetings. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I see no more hands. So I had 2 announcements. My first is that we do have an attendee, and he has been here actually at quite a few meetings, and he has not been introduced. His name is Nicholas Hargis. Nicholas, can you turn on? I guess he can't because he's not a panelist. Okay, I'll just tell you who he is. Nicholas Hargis, he's the field rep for Congresswoman Anna Eshoo. He has been attending our meetings to keep up on what's going on in Portola Valley. He covers San Mateo County and the northern part of Santa Clara County. He works on immigration, tax cases, small business, postal service, among other issues. And he told me that a fun fact about him is that he enjoys longboarding and cooking. He also has a degree from Harvard. Welcome, Nicholas. And I have one more announcement. My colleague, our colleague, Councilmember John Richards, became a proud grandfather today with the birth of his first grandchild, a boy. Congratulations, John. I'm happy for you. All right, moving on. The next piece of the evening is a presentation. Let me get my notes. In this ongoing quest to bring members of the Portola Valley faith community to the town council meetings, I am so happy tonight that Father Martin Mauger, the reigning superior of the monastic community at Woodside Priory, has agreed to attend our meeting and to say a few words. Father Martin joined the Priory monastic community in 1975, and in those 46 years since, he has served in roles including chaplain, director of college counseling, teacher of classes about social justice, ethics, art, and photography. He's been a dorm house master. He's been director of alumni affairs, and a member of the board of trustees. Originally from Newark, New Jersey, where his father worked as a butcher, he eventually earned his BA from St. Anselm College in New Hampshire and his MA from Columbia. In searching the web for facts about Father Martin, I discovered that he has been called a woodworking autodidact because he's known far and wide for his fine woodworking and carving skills. He creates elaborate grandfather clocks, dulcimers, ukuleles, pews, and I would really like to see some of those, by the way. In a June 2012 article in the Almanac written by then reporter Dave Boyce, who, by the way, used to attend every single meeting of the town council in the schoolhouse, I was struck by these lines from his piece. The Benedictine monks who reside in the monastery at Portola Valley's Woodside Priory School have words to live by. Treat others as you would treat yourself. Don't nurse a grudge. Avoid laziness. What a concept to live in community respecting one another. I'm going to go out on a limb here and speak what I believe to be the truth. Why is it so hard for those of us in the secular community to live by those words? Well, maybe not the avoid laziness part, because I do not view our community as a town of lazy folk. But I think that we have struggled mightily this past year in the public space in what I would call at times a culture of distrust, spreading misinformation, and just downright demonstrating uncivil behavior. And I admit my part in this because even at my advanced age, I can still be quite reactive and fly into a fiery fit of passion. I am hoping tonight that Father Martin, with his decades of practice in the Benedictine community at the Priory, can offer us some words to live by that will help us be, at a minimum, patient with one another and nicer to one another. Welcome, Father Martin.
Well, thank you so much. I could hardly recognize myself with that wonderful introduction. And a number of the things that you mentioned there, I had just absolutely forgotten. So thank you for recalling for me a lot of the things that I used to do at one particular time. So I have a background of coming from a very urban area. I lived in the sort of area of Newark, New Jersey, which is a very crowded place. And I moved up to New Hampshire, where I joined a monastery up there, St. Anselm Monastery, St. Anselm Abbey. And it was there that I began my teaching career. So I've been in education since way back in the early 60s. And I have loved every minute of it because I think the future of our world is people who have a good education and know how to use it, and especially are able to gather together and address the different issues that are so prevalent, as was just mentioned, in our world today. Because it's kind of hard listening to so many of the negative comments, so many of the really irrational things that are going on where people don't bother talking to one another. I've been here as for 46 years. I've seen many changes in Portola Valley. The town center was nothing like it is now. It's gorgeous now and so respective of the environment. There was no farmer's market, and the only watering hole in town was a place called Jan's, right down in Portola Road, that some of you may remember. And now we have the wonderful restaurant down on Alpine Road, which is really doing extremely well. A nice place to gather for people to join together and kind of share a community. And as a Benedictine monk, it's all about community. That's what Benedictines do. They gather together in a situation where people from all walks of life gather together with all sorts of backgrounds, and they try to form a community that makes sense, where respect for one another is really important. And it's followed by a rule written by Saint Benedict, which goes back 1,500 years. I'm not going to tell you much about this rule of Saint Benedict, but I will say this. It started with one word, and the word was listen. And so we deal with kids all the time. I love working with kids. Even at my age, it's just like, it keeps you kind of young in a way. It may not show, but it keeps you kind of young. And one of the things we try to tell the kids, it's important to really listen to one another and to really listen with the ear of your heart. So you get connected with other people. You're listening to what they're saying so that you can judge not what they look like, but rather, what are they saying? What are their thoughts? How can we come together and make sense out of this world that we live in, especially where there's so much negativity? And so I think that's really important for all of us to look at. There's so much acrimony in our country and in the world where people just don't listen to one another. They don't talk to one another. And that is a terrible shame, because we have two ears to hear with and only one mouth to talk with. And it seems like we're using the mouth far more than we're using our ears. And our educational vision here at the school is to emphasize the idea of listening to each other, to respect one another. We're working with teenagers all the time. And with teenagers, that in some ways that may seem counter cultural, but it comes out to learning what it means to listen and to respect one another. And I think they're the kinds of qualities that when a student graduates from the school, they will have to offer to this community, and to bring people together, not separate them. There's too much separation, too many bridges built, and not enough bridges built, and too many walls are being built. And I think that's really a shame. So I'd just like to leave you with the idea that we try to do what we can to create a community that will make sense to the kids once they graduate. We have kids from Portola Valley, of course, and from Africa and China and Europe and South America, Mexico, and all over the world as part of our community. So it's kind of hard if you're on a football team or a volleyball team and your person is from one of the countries we are taught to hate. You don't hate them once you know who your roommate is or your teammate is or something like that. Those are the kinds of things that we find as being really important. One of the things that I like to do is within this community here, every month or so, I'll go over to Sequoias and greet the people there. And it's just a wonderful experience. These are the people who are like my age and even older, and spend some time with them, listening to them, and then listening to me. Greeting with all the local pastors and ministers in the area, all the 5 communities. It's really important that we share our values, the good values that really make sense in life. So as far as I am concerned, I think that the mission of education is really, really important. We try to do it as best we can here, and it to me, it makes a lot of sense because when the kids come back, they'll tell us, you know what, it made a big difference, what we learned at the Priory. So anyway, I'm all for more communication, more listening, more talking, and more respect for one another, because I think that's got the thing that's going to take the world that's so acrimonious and make it a lot better. I think we do a good job in Portola Valley, but there's a whole world out there that we have to kind of turn around. So I thank you for your time and for allowing me to talk to you all. And it's a pleasure. I've known some of you, of course, but it's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I turn to my colleagues to see if they have any questions or comments, I am remiss in not introducing Patrick, the head of school at the Woodside Priory. Patrick, can you say hi?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Yeah, thank you. New to Priory, just been here just over a year, but just so blessed to be in this community and be part of it, and so grateful because this town is fantastic, and I'm just so honored to be part of Priory and really engaging and getting to know our town. So very grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to the council. Does anyone have a comment or a question? Nope. Anybody in the?
Marianne,
Jeff.
I'll say the one thing you left out is Father Martin also makes a mean pizza.
I did not know this.
Yes, there's a pizza oven on campus. It is amazing. It's tried out for many occasions. Father Martin, Patrick, I just want to thank you both for being here. As the husband of a Priory teacher and the father of two Priory kids, I can say that the Priory really walks the walk, along with talking the talk about a community, about the Benedictine values. It's been a really great thing for my family. It's been a great thing for the Priory community and for our community. So thank you both for being here, and look forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, listen, we're happy to host pizza anytime. We'll get the whole town council. We'll get you together. We'll have some pizza. It'll be delightful. Anytime.
Well, we're going to remember that.
All right, do that. We're going to hold you to it, Mayor Derwin. We're going to hold you to that.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Well, thanks so much, Father Martin and Patrick, for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Welcome anytime. And I am really going to listen tonight to my constituents, and I am going to be very respectful.
Oh, that's great. We have to leave. We have got another event we're doing now, so we have to get back to that. Thank you so much. Nice meeting you all. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, consent agenda. Any member of the public can speak to an item or all items on the consent agenda. You may speak on each item up to 3 minutes. However, only the actual council members can pull an item from the consent agenda. Would any member of the public wish to speak to an item on the consent agenda? Okay, would any member of the council wish to pull an item from the consent agenda?
Mayor
Yes,
Derwin, there's a hand that went up just after you asked that from the public.
all righty. Sharon, is that
I believe it's Carolyn. Yes.
Carolyn?
So yes, I would like to come back to number 6 on the consent agenda. And I was hoping that somebody would be able to explain, I know you gave me an explanation, why we're not saying the Pledge of Allegiance, but I've looked at, how much we have spent on disinfecting all the buildings, how we're purchasing plexiglass, and I know that the staff doesn't feel comfortable, but if anybody can actually explain to us what it is that they're not feeling comfortable with. Thank you.
Right. Would anyone else wish to speak to the consent agenda? Going, gone. Okay, back to the council. Would anyone like to pull something from the consent agenda? Cara, number 6, could you just, I'm going to pull that. So do I have a motion for items 2, 3, 4, 5?
So move.
Okay, moved by Jeff, seconded by Craig. Discussion, roll call.
Councilmember Alves,
Aye.
Councilmember Wernicott. Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hughes,
Aye.
Mayor Derwin.
Aye. Item number 6, Cara, can you very, very briefly explain why this is appearing on our agenda?
Sure. There is a new state law that authorizes the town council to meet remotely. To do so, the council needs to confirm or adopt a resolution stating that there is a current state of an emergency and that there is a need to meet remotely. This council in the past has determined that given the rise of the Delta variant, that it is still not safe to accept a large group of public members into the small schoolhouse. The schoolhouse is not yet set up for that type of meeting. And so under AB 361, the new state law, we are required to make this finding that authorizes the council to meet remotely.
Thank you, Cara.
I would also say that most cities on the peninsula are still meeting remotely for similar reasons.
Yeah, through the chair, Mayor Derwin, I was going to make that a similar point. That continues to be the case. And the other factor in this conversation, certainly before the governor's requirements here, was that remote meetings have been a very successful exercise in bringing in new voices and making this participation much more convenient for people. And without the technology in place to allow for hybrid meetings, the concern was that fewer people would be able to attend meetings over a period of time in between essentially now and the time that we have in place the hardware for the virtual meeting system, which we hope to have very early next year. The person who's doing this work has become the most popular person on the peninsula and is plying his trade in many cities. Woodside was the first, and we actually helped as a team develop that with them, go over and test the system and make sure it worked for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy and Cara. Do I have a motion for this item?
Move approval of the ordinance.
Thanks.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Alves,
Aye.
Councilmember Wernicott,
Aye.
Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hughes,
Aye.
Mayor Derwin.
Aye. Thanks. Moving on to the regular agenda, item number 7 is a recommendation by the assistant to the town manager about SB 1383. I am not going to read all that language. Brandy, are you going to handle this? Jeremy?
Yes, I'm going to handle it. I am going to give a brief presentation. Mayor and council members, I'm here tonight to familiarize you with SB 1383 and review decisions we are looking to the council to consider in advance of introducing the required ordinance in November. I'm going to attempt to go through this quickly. We will have an opportunity to go into the specifics of the ordinance in more detail at the November meeting. And before I begin, I would like to introduce Jack Johnson and Jack Steinman from the County Office of Sustainability, who are both panelists on the meeting tonight. This is an overview of what we'll be talking about quickly tonight, the goals of SB 1383, an overview of the requirements and key dates, what the town is required to do, the MOU with the county for the edible food recovery requirement, an update on our environmentally preferable purchasing and practices policy, and a review of the waiver we're putting up for consideration to the council, and a potential record keeping tool. And just as a first introduction to, or an overview of SB 1383, it's the most significant waste reduction mandate to be adopted in California in the last 30 years. It requires the state to reduce organic waste, which includes food waste, green waste, paper products, the disposal of those by 75% by 2025. And it also requires the state to increase edible food recovery 20% by 2025. Landfilling organic waste leads to the anaerobic breakdown of that material, which creates methane. Landfills are responsible for 21% of the state's methane emissions, and landfills are the third largest producer of methane. And just as a reminder, methane is 72 times more potent than carbon dioxide over a 20-year horizon. So here is a brief overview of the key dates for SB 1383. You'll see there's two key dates: January 1st of 2022, the regulations take effect and the state is going to begin enforcing them, and January 1st of 2024, local governments are required to enforce those regulations. And so this is just exemplifies how extensive this this bill will reach our departments. So it really affects every department in the town, not only with things that we have to implement, but with record keeping requirements. And it also looks to the council as well to assist with that. So this is an overview of the key elements and enforcement actions that the town has to take over here on 2022. And then again on 2024, you'll see that we'll have to start making sure that those entities can comply. And so now I'm going to briefly go through these key elements on the left here. So the most basic element of the regulation is that each resident and business must subscribe to an organic waste collection service that source separates the waste. And because of the garbage franchise agreement that we updated with Green Waste January 1st of 2019, we are actually, that franchise agreement anticipated this rule. And so we are currently source separating all of our waste. It also requires that jurisdictions have enforceable requirements on haulers that collect organic waste within the jurisdiction, and also commercial and residential generators and self-haulers. And that's not just Green Waste as a hauler. I think of Got Junk. It's really any hauler outside of C&D haulers. So in addition, there's an edible food recovery program requirement. You can see there's lots of elements to this. The MOU that we have in the packet with the county, the county has put in place a program that would take over the food recovery and the reporting and enforcement elements of this part of the SB 1383 requirements, because they knew that they had the capacity to better connect the edible food providers with the folks that needed them. There's also extensive education requirements for the jurisdiction to communicate with the generators and commercial businesses. We also, as the town, are required to procure a certain amount of waste every year. We will know our target prior to January 1st, 2022, but we can decide what mix of compost, mulch, or biomass derived from electricity or renewable gas that we want to use to meet our target. There are also construction and landscaping requirements, and these requirements are actually already met by our existing construction and demolition ordinance and our outdoor water efficient landscape ordinance. So again, there's additional inspection and enforcement requirements. I'm going to go through those quickly as well. So we must have enforcement and inspection in place for the edible food recovery, which again, this includes tier 1 and tier 2 entities, and these are going to impact restaurants in town, as well as Roberts as a grocery store and a few additional entities. And again, this would be covered by that MOU with the county. We also have to have enforcement and inspection that makes sure that all of the generators are putting the waste in the proper place. And then here again is an overview of all of the responsibilities that we have. And I wanted to just go through this to show you what things that we're bringing to you impact each of these responsibilities. So from the start on the left, the potential waiver from CalRecycle, which I'm going to discuss in further detail, would impact that organic collection services to all residents and businesses. The education and outreach to the community will need to be done by the town, Green Waste, and the county, depending on which type of education. Securing the access to recycle and edible food recovery capacity, that is done through the county MOU, and establishing that edible food recovery program is also through the MOU. The procurement of recyclable and recovered organic products, that update to our EPPP covers both of those requirements in the ordinance. And then monitoring compliance and conducting enforcement. The waiver would impact some of this, but we would still have to do some compliance and enforcement, and record keeping, and I'll go through that again in more detail. So here are the record keeping requirements. The items that I have highlighted in orange would be impacted by the waiver. We wouldn't, depending on how long the waiver is for, we could start those later. So we would still have to record, keep records of education and outreach, the food recovery program, which again, the county would handle and send us the required reporting, the procurement for recycled waste and recycled paper, and then inspection and enforcement. And so here, I know that you probably can't read the full details of this slide, but this is an outline of all of the implementation record and record keeping requirements. And then this slide here is the section of the ordinance which could be impacted by the waiver. So the waiver would only apply to this organic waste collection requirements, but you can see here it hits several things. So it's we would not have to implement mandatory service. There's a lot of coloring and labeling requirements that could go into place later. So it's just the record keeping requirements are breathtaking. I actually was in a webinar today to further understand them, and they're extensive. So then this just is a slide to explain when CalRecycle oversight takes place. That begins in 2022, but they are definitely looking to jurisdictions to have everything in place and start doing that record keeping and enforcement on January 1st. And so here's all of the things that they are responsible for. And again, one of those is authorizing a waiver. And so this is a list of benefits that I put together for applying for that waiver. And again, it's a waiver that is targeted at low populations, and CalRecycle has understands that for low populations, it can be more difficult to collect and divert the organic waste, but also with these record keeping requirements. And so if we applied for that waiver, it would give time for resources to emerge. So everyone is every municipality and special district in the state is in the same place we are. There's CalRecycle, actually in a meeting with them, they didn't necessarily agree on how the requirements impacted us. So it would give time to sort that out. It would also allow us to fully understand and implement all the provisions of the organics collection requirements. Also, that mandatory service requirement, we currently in the town do not require folks to subscribe to mandatory garbage service. So we have to work out how to require that either within the ordinance or the municipal code. We also need to update our municipal code to address the new requirements and the updates to our garbage franchise agreement. This would also give us time to understand and implement hauler licensing. So again, any hauler aside from C&D will need to be approved as a hauler in town. We will also, if the council, when we bring the ordinance, decided that they would allow waivers for either space constraints or a low volume of waste, we have to put that process in place. And then we believe that there are not any updates needed to the garbage franchise agreement, again, because green waste and the consultant anticipated the provisions of SB 1383 as much as they could, but there could potentially be things in there that we need to address. And then it would also give us time to develop and implement the record keeping and compliance methods. And so I just did want to give a little preview of this. The town of Woodside, and we've been working closely with the town of Woodside on SB 1383, but we also did have a joint demo of this tool, Recyclist, which has provisions in it for doing all of the record keeping for SB 1383, but also you can see these additional bills that we have to do record keeping for, which I now do in an Excel spreadsheet. But the additional benefit of this tool would be that Green Waste uses it, and we could import all of their information for SB 1383 but also these other bills. And then we could also, the county is going to do all of the edible food recovery record keeping in this tool. So it would put everything in one place, which would make the record keeping slightly less onerous. So that's something that we're still looking into, but we'll probably bring back at a later date. So again, the decisions before you tonight are, if you would like to adopt a resolution authorizing the town manager to enter into that MOU with the county to establish the edible food recovery program, to adopt the update to the environmentally preferable purchasing and practices policy, and to direct staff to file a waiver and then bring back the ordinance in November. And one of the things that we wanted to make clear is that there are actually very few decisions to be made in regard to SB 1383. Most of the elements of the ordinance we just have to comply with. And so when we do bring back the ordinance in November, we'll make sure to really call out those elements that are decisions for the council. So with that, if there are any questions, I also included this link that CalRecycle has a special page specifically for elected officials. And then this is the main, the second link is the main page.
Thanks, Randy.
If, Madam Mayor, if I could just add a couple of points to this presentation. Randy has really put a lot of work into understanding this new legislation and its implementation impacts for the town. I did want to say that SB 1383 was adopted in 2016, but the regulations implementing it were not adopted until about a year ago in the middle of the pandemic. And so all cities and towns have been struggling to comply with the very extensive requirements. Cal Cities sponsored some legislation that would have allowed for some extra funding to cities to implement these requirements. Unfortunately, that portion of the bill did not pass, but there was a slight extension given in terms of the time period for cities to comply and not risk any penalties for later compliance. So it's it's something that everyone is struggling with. I'm actually not aware yet of a city who has passed a compliant SB 1383 ordinance. All of the cities or on the peninsula are waiting until November and December because they're still working out some of these details. It is a very heavy lift. So with that, I will turn it back to the mayor.
Thanks, Cara. Vice Mayor Craig Hughes.
Yes, I have a question as to what are the penalties? If you're, I mean, there's obviously a lot of different things that we have to comply with here, but let's say we're not keeping the right records. What happens? Does the state fine us? Do they take over our garbage franchise? Do they, what happens?
My understanding is that they will do everything they can to work with the jurisdiction before they give them penalties. And so basically the penalties would only come if they were willfully disregarding the provisions of the ordinance. So that's my understanding so far. I don't actually know the specific penalty. I don't think it's a penalty amount. It's more where they put you into they
Double
put you
secret
like
probation.
on probation. Yes. And so so it's and that's something that they use regularly as a tool. And what it means is, like, right now we're on because we're not on probation, we get inspected by CowerCycle like every 2 years, and if we were on probation it would be every year. But I would say this, they have definitely ratcheted up what they're going to, or what they could potentially do with the record keeping. We have to provide the records within 10 days of the request. We're required to have them up to date by 60 days. So they have ratcheted it up, but all things point to them working with a jurisdiction to bring them into compliance ahead of garbage probation.
Thanks.
Okay. Are there other questions of the council or planning commission? Looking for hands. Okay, oh yes, Jeff and then Sarah.
Thanks. Brandy, how is green waste sort of, are they gearing up for this? Are they comfortable with this, or are they struggling with their part of this lift?
In my talks with them, I mean, they're gearing up for it. It's been on their radar, since, as Cara said, since it was being discussed. And I will give them kudos for being as proactive with that garbage franchise agreement as they could without knowing what the final regulations would be. And, just by virtue of the collection system that was put in place by parsing out the yard trimmings, that really did go a long way. And then the colored bins were very forward thinking as far as this goes. And then they have been, we've had questions for them. One big question we had for CowerCycle was whether or not their facilities met the requirements in SB 1383. They're required to take the waste to certain facilities, and the answer was basically none of the facilities have the licensing yet and won't until I think it was 2023, because they have to go through several quarters of proving it, and then they'll always have to keep proving it. So it's not a static thing. But I'm guessing, as green waste, because they have ZBest and it's one of the biggest composting facilities, that they will do everything they can to keep it licensed.
Thank you.
Sarah?
So thank you for this. This was really clearly laid out, and I'm generally totally on board with your recommendations. Just have a couple questions. And I was wondering if you could go back to the slide where you laid out all of the different ordinances or aspects on one, and it was somewhere in different colors.
That one, or okay, there's
I think the next one. The one
okay. This
Yeah.
is specifically
Oh,
speaks to the
yes.
record keeping requirements.
Okay, then it is the other one. So,
Okay.
yeah, I'm just kind of curious, like, what of all these do you think, is it the record keeping that's the most concerning? What of all this is going to be the most daunting change for the town? I'm just kind of curious, thinking ahead.
I think that there's two parts. I think that the record keeping is going to be tremendous, and it's, I've done the record keeping for the other two bills for several years, and things here have been pretty static with the what kind of garbage service each of the commercial entities subscribe to, but that's changing, and we will now have to get that information more frequently. But I mean, we are going to have to keep records both internally and externally. So think every time we buy paper, every time we buy mulch, it all has to be recorded and within 60 days and accessible to Cow Recycle. And so, I mean, the record keeping is one portion, but then putting in place all of the compliance processes is going to be significant as well, because everything it says hauler needs licensing. Are you going to do a waiver for space or de minimis volume? All of those things have to have the forms and the processes and the approvals in place with them, and then the compliance on top of that, us having to go out and do inspections, and who's going to do that. So that's why we're recommending the waiver, because as you can see here with the record keeping, I mean, that chunk that has to do with organics collection services is a big part, and that's a big part of those processes being developed. But then we still have, these other things that we are going to have to do as well. And so it would give us time to kind of develop the infrastructure for the record keeping, have things surface, tools surface, things we can copy from other jurisdictions to make the rest of it a little bit easier.
Thank you.
Okay, let me see. Are there other questions of the council or the planning commission? I do not see any. Sharon, are there questions of the public? I think Rita has her hand up. Rita? Rita, do you have your audio turned on?
I don't think she's been pulled over to be a panelist. I don't see her under panelist.
Okay. All right, is there anybody else? I mean, I'm waiting, there's also the 7562 number.
Madam Mayor, let me try Rita one more time here.
Okay.
Thank you. I wasn't given the unmute button, but if I could, I don't need the slides. I don't know if you guys need the slides, but I'm feeling that I'm coming in the middle of a conversation, or people have been talking acronyms, and perhaps everyone on the screen has talked about this particular thing. But can you tell me, what does this mean to the residents of Portola Valley first? Because it's not really been explained. It's talked about, businesses and mentioned residents, but what does it mean to us? And second thing is, how much will this cost the residents? We just had an increase for green waste and another increase on top of that. How much is this going to cost us when this is implemented? And will the town, I know this is something I've been asking for a couple of years, but are we going to be doing any recycling for bottles? We've had an increase, and I probably sound like a broken record or a broken bottle, because we've had an increase of broken bottles and cans distributed along the roads in form of garbage, but you'd have to drive almost 20 miles in order to get any kind of bottle deposits. I've talked to them in Sacramento. I think I've connected, Jeremy about 1.5 years ago with a guy from Sacramento who had a program. I guess it wasn't right for our town, but there are no new contracts. The town really needs that particular service, but for this particular service, maybe I'm missing it and I'm missing all the acronyms of what it means, but can you please explain what does it mean to the residents of Portola Valley? And I would just really like to know what it means as in our daily garbage, our weekly garbage drop off. Are we then taking this edible food and having to transfer it? And that's what the extra cost is of what the town has to keep track of. I'm pretty good at this stuff, but I'm missing this one. So thank you very much for whatever answers you can give, and would really like a bottle deposit, can deposit type of program within town. It would drastically reduce our recycles that Green Waste is picking up every week. Thank you.
Brandy, can you speak to that, or can anyone else on the panel?
I'll speak to it. I'll speak to my portion, and then if Jack want to say anything about the edible food recovery portion. And Cara as well, if you want to jump in. But basically, because the garbage franchise agreement anticipated the major changes, which are the yard trimmings collection being separate and the color container requirement and labeling, the only thing that I see that would impact residents is the mandatory service provision. So right now, because we don't require subscription to garbage service, if someone didn't have that, they could potentially be required to have that. So I think that's, I think that, so I mean, that is the only impact I could see financially for a resident. And then the edible food recovery, I mean, that is something that's going, again, is targeted at those large entities. So that have extra food. So think Alpine Inn, Rosati's, Roberts, any large restaurant or market or place that has, food service like that. So, but that's why we're looking to the county, because they can more easily connect the extra food with the folks who need it. But if look, I can't see Jack on here, right? I mean, they're on here, I just can't see them on my screen. So if they want to say anything.
It's Jack Johnson, I'll talk. If I may, Mayor.
Yes, you may.
Okay. Hi, Rita. I'm Jack Johnson. I work for the Office of Sustainability in the County of San Mateo. We are running the Edible Food Recovery Program, part of 1383, on behalf of all the jurisdictions in the county. There will be, for the edible food recovery portion, no cost to any individual person in the county, and certainly not in Portola Valley, unless a grocery store or supermarket or hotel were to incrementally increase prices to recoup the costs that they might have to pay someone to take it away, but they're paying someone now to either take it to the landfill or to compost. The edible food recovery program would just be paying someone to take it to human consumption. So it's the same food, it's just going to a better cause to prevent greenhouse gases. We have a program that tries to increase, sorry, Brandy, this is about bottles. We were able to create 2 sites in the North Fair Oaks area that are taking back bottles. That is really complicated. I'm happy, if you want me to, I will work to get you all more information about ways you might be able to do that out there. or to connect you with more resources, Rita. I just don't want to overstep my bounds here. I was invited to talk about edible food recovery, but I'm happy to talk to you offline about bottles, broken or otherwise. I just don't want to overstep. So I'll just follow the direction of the mayor or Brandy.
Randy?
Oh, Jack, why don't we can set up a meeting and I'll get more information from you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for answering the question as well.
Okay, so the answer was, this is pretty much invisible to the residents unless the residents do not have garbage service, in which case now they're going to have garbage service. It's not going to cost any more, at least until we have a new contract with the garbage service, correct?
That is my understanding. Again,
And
it's a big ordinance and we're still,
right.
digging through it and meeting with Cal Recycle to understand it and the implications for us. So, but that is my understanding at this time.
Okay.
And I would also add on that point that the one of the reasons why staff is recommending the waiver is that there will certainly be some start costs associated with the record keeping on behalf of green waste. And so if we did not request the waiver, we would expect green waste to at least have a discussion with us about some of those extra costs and try to pass them on to our residents. We think that if we had a couple of years to implement this program and have other experiences, that green waste would be much more able to implement those minor record keeping costs just on a day-to-day basis without extra cost.
All righty, thanks, Cara. Let's see, are there any other questions of the public? I do not see any hands. So I'll bring it back to the panelists. Council, do you have comments, thoughts? Does anybody want to make a motion? I see we are being asked to adopt a resolution, adopt an updated environmentally preferable purchasing and practice policy, and then direct staff to do 2 things. Craig.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's a large amount of work here for staff and green waste and the county and a bunch of other people, but there's not really a lot for us to decide. I mean, I think the decisions that the actions or requests that staff has made here are all pretty straightforward. And it's good to have an understanding of the breadth of what's going on here. But from a council point of view, I think the action's pretty straightforward.
All right. Would you like to make a motion? Jeff.
I agree with Craig. I want to thank Brandy, Jack, and Jack for all of the work you've all done and for communicating this to us. And yes, I will make a motion to adopt the 4 recommendations from the staff report.
Second.
Cara, would you like these to be done separately or in one big pile?
It can be done together in one big motion.
All right. All right. Is there a second to Jeff's one big motion?
Second.
Okay, Greg, discussion? Roll call, please, Sharon.
Councilmember Alves,
Aye.
Councilmember Warnikoff,
Aye.
Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hughes.
Aye.
Mayor Derwin.
Aye. Thank you, Jack and Jack. And Brandy, thank you so much. I mean, it's so apparent how much work this was. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you. And I do want to acknowledge Cara. She and I have spent a lot of time going through this and I could not have done it without her. So thank you.
Thank you, Cara. Right, item number 8. This is our actual joint meeting of the Town Council and the Planning Commission. It is a study session about the housing element update And I believe Laura and Adrian will be running this piece of the meeting, correct?
Yes, we will. Just a second. Let me share my screen. Okay, let me know if that doesn't look okay to everyone. Thank you and good evening, Mayor, council members, Chair of the Planning Commission and Planning Commissioners, and welcome also to members of the public. I'm Laura Russell, Planning and Building Director, and I'm joined tonight by Adrian Smith, who is the town's Senior Planner. So our presentation is broken into these three pieces, some background information, and then we're going to have an update on the community engagement effort for the housing element update. And then we're going to review some demographic information and ask for council and commission feedback. So let's zoom out for just a moment for some context. The town council has prioritized housing related topics for many years. In 2016, council adopted the housing strategic plan that focused on housing for three key groups of people in the community. Seniors that want to stay in the community, young people that want to either return or to stay here, who may be priced out of the market, and then the workforce that's vital for the town's success. So you'll see in the demographic information that we're going to share with you in just a few minutes that these groups remain a really important part of the community that needs to be served. So if you're new to the topic of the housing element update, we encourage you to read the report or watch the Zoom recording from the April 28th, 2021 council meeting. So there was a lot of detail at that time and a lot of introductory materials as well. In short, the town needs to develop a housing element, which is a plan for housing in the community, and it needs to be certified by the state. We have a specific timeline to do that and certain requirements that we have to meet. So here's a way to think about that process. The foundation is this core town principle of community engagement. We layer on top of that safety considerations, particularly fire safety and seismic and geologic safety. Then we need to meet state law requirements. And if we can do all of that, we end up with a housing element that can be certified. So at that council meeting of April 28th, council gave direction on a number of things that are all underway. So first, council formed a council subcommittee of council members Alves and Wernickehoff, and they've been guiding the process since that time. The town has formed an ad hoc housing element committee, and they've started meeting, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. We've initiated community-wide outreach. We'll talk about that in more detail as well. We are forming a committee of committees and receiving input from the council and the planning commission, which is what we're doing here this evening. So many of you have seen this before, but as a reminder, here's the overall timeline for this effort. We're working on community feedback, which is running now through at least summer of 2022. The housing element itself in the kind of burgundy color has multiple steps that we need to go through in order to get certified. We're going to do an environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act, which we call CEQA. And there's going to be amendments to the town's zoning codes to implement the housing element as well. So you can see that we're here now in fall of 2021, and this process runs through the end of 2022. So now specifically talking about the community engagement component of this effort. As I mentioned, the town has formed an ad hoc housing element committee, and they are tasked with the detailed analysis and discussion that will ultimately make recommendations to Planning Commission and Council. There's 15 members, and they're appointed by the town council. They include representatives of the subcommittee, the Planning Commission, ASCC, and the Equity Committee. So far they've met 3 times. Each of those agendas is quite focused on specific topics to move in the direction of policies, programs, and housing sites that will be needed in order to meet the regional housing needs allocation, what we call RHNA. The committee takes public comments on all of those discussion items, so the public is welcome to participate. All of the agendas, minutes, and Zoom recordings are available on the town website and will be throughout the process. So here are examples of the topics that committee has covered so far. Portola Valley demographics and housing trends, the organization and evaluation of the existing housing element, the affordability income categories. We've talked about the state law definitions, the county-wide income categories, how those are applied and how they are enforced. We've started to talk about the housing site selection process and some of the laws and requirements that are in place. And we just started a very early discussion around the site scenarios so that the committee can start to think about how they can eventually identify sites for housing. Important upcoming topics include ADUs, accessory dwelling units, a discussion about the affiliated housing program, fire safety and geologic safety, site analysis, and other topics. So we wanted to make sure we benefit from the experience of all of our committees. So we are forming a committee of committees, is how we've been referring to it. And so we asked all of the town committees if they wanted to participate in this process and asked them, if so, to delegate 1 or 2 members to gather together to provide input and to receive updates on the process. So that email officially went out to them initially at the end of September, and we asked people to put it on their October agendas. So we'll be going back and collecting that information in hopes of scheduling that first all committee meeting in November or perhaps in December. So those representatives of all the different committees are invited to bring forward their questions and comments, the needs and interests of the committees that they represent, and will be an opportunity for them to bring the information back from the overall effort into those committees to keep them involved. And then in regards to communications, the website has general information at this time. We're continuing to build that out and add additional information. It will include tools such as surveys and mapping in the future. There'll be at least monthly updates via the town news, key milestones. Most everyone is familiar with our e-notice system. It has a topic for housing to notify residents of the meetings and the major milestones. And really remarkably, 403 subscribers are already on the list for housing for the e-notification list listserv. So that is really very broad community interest and participation in this important topic. We also have a dedicated email address, housing@portolavalley.net. That comes to Adrian and myself. So that's an opportunity for people to ask questions and get additional information.
Laura, if I can interrupt just for a quick second, I want to put that 403 number in some context. The population of Palo Alto is 66,000 people. That would be the equivalent of 6,400 people subscribing to one of their listservs. That does not happen. That's a remarkable number of people. So I think it's worth repeating how excited we are to see that many residents of Portola Valley interested in this process and having access to great information.
Thanks, Jeremy. It's amazing. We're really excited about it. So we have held our first community meeting. It was for all members of the community, any level of interest or knowledge about the housing element update. It was held on October 14th. We had approximately 70 participants. Over Zoom, you know, people come and go a little bit, but 70 is a good number. The topic was an introduction to the housing element and feedback on 4 key questions that we asked them, the same questions that we'd like to ask you this evening. We had 6 breakout rooms of 10 to 12 participants, and each of those breakout rooms had 30 minutes of discussion. And then we came back together for some reporting out. So there were wide-ranging opinions that came out of those groups, and we have a really detailed list of community feedback that we've been compiling. So we're going to publish that in the next couple of days. So this is just the very high-level feedback and some of the common themes, but we've got detailed phrases, kind of bullet points from all of the different rooms and lots of different types of comments and a full range. So we've got them organized according to those 4 questions. And then, as you can imagine, there were some residents that wished to speak on topics that weren't covered by those 4 questions. So we've gathered those as well. And so we'll include that out in the reporting out to the community, and we'll be able to pass that on to the Ad Hoc Housing Element Committee. So some common themes that came up from those discussions. People are very interested in housing for people who work within the town, and specific examples that people gave were teachers, firefighters, town employees, and Sequoia staff. People are very interested in housing for older folks, for the elderly, and for those with special needs. People expressed an interest in diversity of housing choices and affordability levels to meet a range of needs. It's very obvious, not surprising to anyone, that fire safety was a major topic in all of the rooms, I believe. There was concerns about evacuation, increased population, and just the general idea that we needed to make sure that any new development was as fire safe as possible, and a priority about making the existing community as safe as possible, and even safer in the future than it is today. There was objections in multiple rooms to the state dictating the town's housing interest. There was, in some of the rooms, there was some concern that the town hadn't appealed RENA, for example, or taken other actions. There was discussion about the impact of ADUs, accessory dwelling units, both in the past and looking forward into the future, and how those relate to the RENA allocation. And there was discussion about the permitting process and whether that permitting process could be quicker to streamline that process for ADUs. There was discussion about the existing town infrastructure, sewer and water came up. There was concerns also around the drought, of course. And there was discussion about public transportation and where additional housing could be located, considering the lack of public transportation in the community, and whether it was ever going to be feasible to increase the amount of public transportation. Additional common themes were around the town's rural character and open space, and how important it is for new housing to blend into that. Ideas about multifamily housing along the main corridors and Alpine and Portola roads, and discussion about affordable housing units located along the main roads, again, proximate specifically to shops and services. So in terms of community engagement next steps, the Ad Hoc Housing Element Committee is meeting monthly, and we expect them to continue to meet monthly through the end of 2022. The community-wide outreach will continue. We're going to increase the interactive aspects of the website and continue to build that out. And there'll be 2 more community meetings. We expect them to be in winter and summer of 2022. As I mentioned, the Committee of Committees is going to meet in either November or December of this year, and then we expect 2 more times next year. And then we'll be back for input from the Town Council and the Planning Commission, probably 2 more meetings in 2022 to make sure that things stay on track. We're thinking about a townwide survey option as well. So that's something I wanted to mention as we're talking about the community-wide outreach. So we're working on that right now. So we can't stop talking about 400 residents being on the e-notice list. And so this is really the best way for residents to stay up to date. So if you can't read this very well, you don't have to, it's okay. But what you need to know is go to the town's website. The easiest way is go to community and then stay informed. And then you subscribe to the e-notices. If you want everything having to do with this, you sign up in 2 places. For the calendar, you sign up for housing, and then you'll know about meetings that are related to this. And then if you want the news items, you sign up for housing news. If you sign up for both of those, you'll be updated, you'll get automatic notices, and you'll know what's happening. So that concludes the first part of our presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Adrienne. She's going to talk about the demographics and the discussion questions that we have for you this evening. So here's Adrienne. Is Adrienne there? Just a second, please. Technical difficulties.
I can see her.
It looks like an audio problem. Yeah, we can see her.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, all set. So we'll just get to the next slide. Thank you, Laura. So we'll start with population growth trends. So generally the population of the Bay Area continues to grow because of natural growth patterns. and because of the strong economy that draws new residents to the region. This graph gives us an understanding of Portola Valley's growth rate versus that of San Mateo County and the Bay Area. The population of Portola Valley increased minimally by 3.2% from year 2000 to 2020, which is well below the growth rate of the Bay Area. Next slide, please. So the distribution of age groups shapes what types of housing the community may need in the near future. An increase in the older population may mean that there is a need for more senior housing options, while higher numbers of children and young families can indicate a need for more family housing options and related services. There has also been a move by many to age in place or downsize to stay within their communities, which can mean more multifamily and accessible units are also needed. In Portola Valley, the median age in 2000 was 47. By 2019, this figure had increased to about 51 years of age. More specifically, the population of those under 14 has decreased slightly since 2010, while the 65 and over population has also decreased somewhat. Interestingly, there's been a significant jump in the age 15 to 24 population. It could be that more college-age kids are moving back home due to affordability constraints. Another noticeable increase is in the age groups of 75 to 84 and the 85 plus populations, which could spell an increased need for multi-generational housing in the community. Next slide. So understanding the racial makeup of the town and region is important for designing and implementing effective housing policies and programs. Since 2000, the percentage of residents in Portola Valley identifying as white has decreased. And by the same token, the percentage of residents of all other races and ethnicities has increased by 9.7 percentage points as of 2019. In absolute terms, the other race and Latinx population increased the most, while the white non-Hispanic population decreased the most. By comparison, this trend has also occurred in San Mateo County, albeit by higher percentage points. Next slide, please. So this chart compares the wage groups of employed residents in Portola Valley, as shown in the blue bars, to workers coming to Portola Valley for their jobs, and they're seen in the green bars. So there are 1,702 employed residents in Portola Valley. However, overall, the town is a net exporter of workers. So Portola Valley has more low-wage jobs than low-wage residents, where low wage refers to jobs paying less than $25,000 a year. At the other end of the wage spectrum, the town has more high-wage residents than high-wage jobs, where high wage refers to jobs paying more than $75,000 annually. You see in the circled blue bar that most residents earning $75,000 or more work outside of Portola Valley. Next slide, please. So the region's home values have increased steadily since 2000, besides a decrease during the Great Recession. The rise in home prices have been especially steep since 2012, with the median home value in the Bay Area nearly doubling during this time. Since 2001, the typical home value has increased 184.6% in Portola Valley, from 1.4 million to 4.1 million. This change is significantly higher than the change in San Mateo County and the Bay Area on the whole. So our final slide here of the presentation, we're now moving into some suggested discussion questions. These are the same questions as Laura mentioned that were asked during this month's community-wide meeting breakout room sessions. And the responses from Town Council and Planning Commission tonight will be passed on to the Ad Hoc Housing Element Committee to help inform their future committee discussions. So the questions are, what are some of the town's key housing needs and challenges? What policies and programs have the most promise to meet the town's housing needs? Would you rather see new units, aside from ADUs, spread throughout the town, or fewer projects in more concentrated locations? And finally, imagine it's the year 2031. What does success look like with this housing element update? What words describe the housing in your community now? So with that, I'll let Council and Planning Commission get to their discussion. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Adrienne. So Laura, can you give me some guide rails here. Are you looking to have a discussion about these specific 1, 2, 3, 4 questions?
Yeah, we would recommend that you take public comments. Of course, if you have any questions for us from the Planning Commission or from the council, we'd be happy to try to answer those questions. Then public comment. And then we would welcome your feedback on any of the materials that we've covered. And we would just highlight those 4 questions that we would like to receive your feedback and discussion on. And then we'll bring all of that feedback into the process and transmit it on to the ad hoc committee, so they get the benefit of your feedback and direction.
Okay, good, thanks. That helps me a lot. To the council and the Planning Commission, all the panelists, do you have questions? And if you do, can you raise the little hand icon, not just your real hand? Okay, I see Sarah Warnikoff.
I don't have a question. I just want to say really quickly, having been on the ad hoc housing committee, how impressed I am with Laura and Adrian. You guys have been doing an outstanding job. The information that's been provided at all of the meetings has been fantastic. The first couple meetings, as she relayed, were really kind of uploading information and educating the group. And I think the last meeting is the one when we finally really got into the details about really what this means and what it looks like in a contextual way. And so I just really wanted to share with the community and the Planning Commission just my thoughts about that, because I think you guys have been doing an outstanding job.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I certainly agree with Sarah. Commissioner Golden.
Yeah, I've got some detailed questions. Later on, I'll come back and address your questions, Laura and Adrian, in terms of overall, but some detailed questions that came up as I was going through the materials. I see that there's a distinction in the law about requirements to address certain groups. And there's some overlap there with our choice as the town council saying we want to address certain groups. Specifically, I was going to get sort of putting that all together, saying it talks about that the housing plan needs to address those at risk of losing their affordable housing. And I wanted to know from a legal sort of state perspective, does that include our seniors and longtime residents?
Yes, I think that it would include that category.
So that's beyond just our desire to accommodate those people as expressed by the council. We actually have some sort of a mandate to address those folks.
Yes, I think to the degree that we are required to address it would be something that we would have to look up, but I agree conceptually that we have a requirement to try to address that.
Okay, second more detailed question. When or if we identify the need for infrastructure improvements to accommodate growth, if we need those, how and where do we address them? Do we address it as part of this element, or do we address it separately? And I guess part of my thinking behind that question is I have gotten the impression that the state tends to sort of say, you signed up to be a municipality, it's your job to manage that and make that infrastructure happen. And so they don't really seem to care is what I'm interpreting that as. And I'm just trying to sort of figure out, so it is our responsibility, and if so, how and when do we address that?
I think that you're probably accurate in that the state and the housing element law don't consider the lack of some of that infrastructure as something that cannot be overcome in order to build housing. So they are looking to municipalities to try to solve those problems. And for us, there's challenges, of course, because our service providers are outside of our agency, right? Our water and sewer providers. And so we might have, for example, in this housing element, we may have a program, and program has a certain definition within housing element law, it's capital P program, where we increase the outreach to those organizations, where we try to streamline the process to be able to hook up to sewer, for example. We, might continue to do more conversation with Cal Water to make sure that the service is sufficient. And so those are the types of things that I can imagine going forward. But yeah, the assumption is we're going to have to solve for those problems.
And if I may interject here through the chair, John, we have regular conversations with our infrastructure partners. So Cal Water, West Bay. I've asked the question specifically, do you anticipate any issues related to providing service as it relates to the new units? The answer I've gotten is no. They don't anticipate any particular issues. That doesn't mean that there won't be impacts in the community should these units be built, because you could have sewer lines being constructed and the like. But that's the current status from them.
And then I guess my final sort of more detailed question relates to our HOAs, and how does the HOA CCNRs interact with what we do as a town and these new state regulations? So for instance, if we were to decide as a town we wanted to increase zoning density, but if the HOAs didn't want to do that, how do they interrelate to each other? I'm a little fuzzy on that. I'm definitely fuzzy on that as to how would we make something like that work?
And I'll ask Cara to tag in on that one, if you would.
Sure. There are certain new state laws that actually preempt HOA regulations. So for instance, the ADU new regulations preempt HOA rules. To the extent that the new state legislation allows for HOA covenants and restrictions, then the state would view those existing covenants as constraints on housing, and it would determine whether projects that are in those HOAs are in fact feasible for purposes of housing element compliance.
So we might not be able to, as a town, select sites within HOAs based on restrictions that they have.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Those are my detailed questions. Next.
Okay, I think it was Commissioner Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm still a little confused about how safety and housing interrelate. I mean, I know we're having a lot of discussions, but obviously the set of questions that you asked in that last slide have a lot to do with what are we going to do about sort of wildfire safety, et cetera. So how are these things ultimately going to sort of get blended together so that we'll be able to have kind of a coherent conversation?
Let me start, and then Jeremy might want to add on to this one as well. So first, as a starting point, we are updating our housing element and our safety element. We're doing both of those things concurrently. The state law requires us to do that now, and it's a good idea, of course. And so we have the same consultant that's working on both teams. So that is helping us to bring some things together. We're also working on some evacuation planning efforts that Jeremy is leading, again, using the same traffic consultant that we're using for the other efforts. So the idea is to bring the best practices, the best mapping, the best information, the best data, and to bring that together through the intersection of the housing element and the safety element update process, and then use that safety element update information to inform the housing discussion. So the ad hoc committee will be learning and becoming conversant in, a number of these different concepts and ideas, and that will be integral to their discussion about housing and where housing should be located and, what form it should take and things like that. And so then, when we get to the point of talking about it with the Planning Commission and the council, we'll also provide some materials to you, and so that you can understand how those pieces have come together. So that would be my kind of general answer. And then I don't know, Jeremy, if you have anything else to add to that.
Thank you. Through the chair, what I would say additionally is that there are a variety of other conversations that are occurring through, in particular, the Wildfire Preparedness Committee that started as early as 2019 that I believe run that complement these conversations. One of the challenges that every municipality has is that there's certain issues that we cannot utilize. We were unable to utilize through the RENA appeal process, including fire issues. And I think that the council's decision not to appeal has borne to be a correct one, given that the 27 entities that did appeal, I think they've heard 25 of those appeals, and all but one was denied, and that was a technical issue related to an annexation in Contra Costa County. So there's some challenge associated with utilizing tools there. That doesn't mean that the town can't find other ways to work on home hardening, defensible space, all of the issues that we've been working on for some time. And I think it's always mentioning, I'll say this every time that I have the floor, December 8th, we're bringing forward a home hardening ordinance that will be very significant. So just wanted to add that element too. There's the other elements of fire safety, in this case, fire safety measures that we're working on that will run as a complement to that. The other thing I will say, Craig, is that there are distinctions in state law around communities' ability to do certain kinds of or make certain kinds of restrictions related to fire severity zones. And the state may be changing some of that over time. It's really nuanced and complicated. So I could spend 20 minutes talking about this. So that's another area where we're looking at to see if there's opportunity. Hope that helps.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I mean, I guess it's, really be helpful to have a draft of the safety element, or, maybe at least the outline of the safety element before we really start digging into making decisions on the housing element. I mean, I was just thinking of that example of, do you want the stuff spread out through town, or do you want it concentrated? And, when I see questions like that, I mean, without understanding the safety issues, it's pretty hard to answer. I mean, because otherwise it just seems like it's more a personal preference about, how you like your housing, but it doesn't really take into account the safety element, which I would think would be critical. And when we go to sort of start really digging into the housing element and how we want to sort of approach that.
Okay,
Thank you.
Commissioner Nicholas Tark.
I am the one who now says, yeah, mute. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate it. If I may, the question of how one considers the crosswalk between the housing element and safety, I think comes up in a number of places, and I'd be interested to know how that will be considered. In particular, is in the consideration of the constraints on housing. And then in particular, in a different section, is the site-specific constraints, both of which can feed into capital P programs as well as into the policies and objectives. So I think I would assume that there will be a crosswalk that will inform these kinds of broader issues. And a good place to take a look at ways in which that was done, probably with a lighter touch than I would imagine we would do so now, is in the previous housing element. So for those of you who have not taken the opportunity to review what was done previously, that will give you sort of a blueprint of what the outcome might look like in ways in which crosswalks can be created. And I'm just going to say that, and I apologize for not putting that in the form of a question. One of the questions that has come up is, what are the limitations on the Brown Act for members of the ad hoc committee to talk with each other, to talk with the leadership of that committee and with other people? And I was moved by the words of the Father Martin earlier about listening to each other. And the question is, what are the limitations on listening to each other more privately within the context of the Brown Act and the ad hoc committee?
Why don't I start with the big picture, and then we can have Cara answer as well. There definitely has been an interest from the chair, Jocelyn Swisher, of thinking about communications broadly and thinking about how the ad hoc committee can connect to the community. And so we will be talking about that and thinking about ways that we can build stronger connections between the committee and the community at large. So I think that this is going to come up in that way. And certainly staff would certainly love to see that connection be strengthened. So we're going to think about ways to do that. I think technically the committee has to comply with the Brown Act, but that doesn't keep the committee from having small group conversations that are less than a quorum, and certainly individual conversations with friends and neighbors to build understanding, to get information, and to do the listening that we were talking about, hearing about earlier tonight.
So there wouldn't be an issue, before Cara, you jump in, there wouldn't be an issue with a member of the ad hoc committee talking with the chair or the vice chair offline. And that's a free flow of information that should be able to occur in the general case.
Yeah, well, we want to always exercise caution. So I think, do you know what I mean? Maybe Cara can do the normal. We have to, use caution around serial meetings and those types of things. So we want to be careful about that. We have kind of talked about maybe you have a buddy, do you know what I mean, on the ad hoc committee, that you have someone that you talk with, so that you know that there's not a potential for a serial meeting to be happening under the Brown Act.
Sure. Yeah, I'm unaware that the serial meeting provisions have actually been exercised, but I understand the issue. Cara, can you help us here?
Sure. I think one of the good things about the ad hoc committee is that you have a larger body. And so the number of people that you can speak with privately and not violate the Brown Act increases to some extent. So what we typically caution with the Planning Commission and other committees and commissions is that you just talk to one person. You have a Brown Act buddy.
Right.
But given the size of the committee, you can talk to as many people as provided it's less than a quorum. And so a safe rule of thumb would be you can speak to Laura, how many people are on the ad hoc committee?
There's 15.
There's 15.
15. Okay. So, 4 would be a safe number, 3 or 4. So that's really the Brown Act issue. But I think the first point that you raised, which is really a community outreach issue, is extremely important, because that is typically a very important role that the ad hoc committee plays, is to go out into the community and talk to neighbors, hear from neighbors, et cetera, and then bring those ideas back to the committee for a fuller discussion.
But just to be clear, there would be no limitation on talking with the chair or the vice chair if one wanted to, being mindful of serial meetings kinds of
Exactly.
Great.
I'd like to also add here that the chair can make decisions on the kinds of communications that they wish to have as it relates to the rest of the membership in order to protect from potential Brown Act issues or otherwise. So that's ultimately up to the chair of any body to make those types of decisions.
Yeah, to be sure. And if the chair just doesn't want to talk to me, that's cool too. But
We always want to talk to you.
I'm not taking it personally, but no, I appreciate that. And to be clear, Chair Swisher and Al have been nothing but gracious. So I am being facetious there. There are other issues of transparency and openness. We've been talking about Brown Act and ways in which communications take place. There's nothing confidential that this group is doing, so it should all be completely transparent, as I understand. That's right.
That's correct.
Right. And there's been a lot of discussion about meeting together, and there's certainly limitations on that. But there wouldn't be any limitation, for example, if members of the ad hoc committee individually wanted to meet in the same place, or certainly members of the public wanted to meet in the same place to have a sense of tangible, palpable, physical community.
Yeah, I think that would be fine. It wouldn't be an official Brown Act meeting, so it wouldn't be subject to the town's policies related to its official meetings.
Right.
And so
they could meet, for example, together during a meeting and have a shared, in a conference room, for example, and have a shared Zoom meeting and have a shared screen.
I think we just have to think through the details. But I think these are good conversations to have with the ad hoc committee and with the chair, and as we start to think about that community outreach.
Great. On a different issue, we were there's sort of a syllabus that would be helpful to have, sort of to understand what the arc of this process is. We have 4 discrete questions that we have here, and I think that that's helpful in some ways. But is there a syllabus or a table of contents or a broader agenda, in the best sense of the word, of what the series of meetings are that we're going to be having, so that we can have a sense as to what the larger picture might be?
Yes, we have a list of the different types of meetings they expect to be having. We're putting that kind of into a graphic format so that the public can track what we think some of those main topics are. So we'll be posting that on the website.
I was actually thinking substantively. It's like, what is going to happen on at any given meeting of the ad hoc committee, so that if people want to tune in, they might know when what it is that they want to what is it they want to see, and so that there's a sense as to the arc of the process.
Like a roll forward agenda.
Well said.
Can I
Sarah.
Can I make a comment? Yeah. So we've talked quite a bit about this in the meetings because we also have off cycle kind of, there's the small group of the chair and the council representatives that do agenda planning. And so we've had a discussion about how do we make more public all of the major topics that are going to be discussed. I think what's difficult is we don't know, Laura, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is exactly when we're going to be discussing them. That might be shifting a little bit. And so there's some reluctance to put too much detail out there because we want to be able, be nimble and be able to, adjust along the way. But as Laura said, my understanding is an overview of the major topics and the arc, to use your words, is forthcoming. And we've been talking about, wanting to have that and being able to share it, in the last couple meetings. I think getting into the detail about exactly when gets trickier because we do kind of react meeting to meeting in terms of what topics we're going to be covering at the subsequent meeting, if that makes sense.
Oh, to be sure. I mean, one of the wonderful things about being a small community
is that it does allow you to be nimble, to use your term, and I think that's right, and to shift as time demands, but to have a broader sense of the arc and of the issues and how the product comes together and different phases in addition to the different topics, I think would be useful. In addition to having kinds of, as Laura said, as the planning director said, to better understand the way in which the community as a whole will be able to engage more directly. So I think both from a process standpoint, a substance standpoint, and then as the Vice Mayor said, a roll forward agenda. Did I get that right? Excellent. Well, that's all very helpful, and we'll look forward to seeing that. And at some point, I trust that we'll be able to talk about the effect of SB 9 on the assumptions that we are making. SB 9 affects different communities differently, of course, and with a community that has high land values and has larger lots, but is infrastructure constrained, it places us in a really different position than almost any other, or than many other communities, both in San Mateo and across the state. So looking at a roll-up projection is interesting, but to address a different way of looking at it, it's going to be important to descend into the particulars.
We definitely will be talking about it, how to apply it, how to think about it. So there's a lot of work going on among all of the planning professionals and legal professionals to try to develop this approach and methodology. So much more to come.
Okay, thanks, Nicholas. Commissioner Judith Wasco.
Thank you. And first, thanks to the ad hoc committee. I know what a big responsibility it is, and those of you on this call that are participating, I want to thank you because it's a lot of work. My fellow commissioners have already addressed some of the points on safety and the need to understand the process for the safety element in light of the housing element, and the importance of multiple avenues for communication, seeking input from the community, and understanding SB 9. I know there's a lot of the ambiguity around SB 9, but that will be important. So I'll look forward to those. The remaining questions are few. First, I know that the discussion and feedback you're looking for tonight includes, asking us what the key housing needs are. And I want to know, is there part of your process on the ad hoc committee to get information on what our community housing needs are? Because I can have an opinion. I certainly, other than the inference from the demographics that were presented, I'm not sure I would actually know. I have a sense as a community, but as a commissioner, I don't want to rely on my own, experience. I want to have some more rigorous approach. Is that going to be part of the ad hoc process?
I don't know that it is in the way that you're describing. We do have through 21 Elements, which is one of our consultants. 21 Elements is the countywide group that we work together on. They have been doing some outreach to different demographics and people that are hard to reach normally. So we're trying to find ways to reach people who might work in the community, for example, that we don't have access to. We don't know how to communicate with them directly. So through that group, we're trying to do some direct outreach and connect with people we wouldn't otherwise connect with. So that is one way that we're trying to do that. And certainly if there are suggestions about other ways to do that, we are open to them. We're, trying to take the best practices and bring it into the process.
And our 21 elements, I know they look at more regional issues if you've signed up. Are they looking at the town specifically as part of that?
Yes. So the outreach to those organizations is more regional, and we think that that probably is appropriate. We probably have people that work in the community that live in Redwood City or live in San Mateo, for example. So we would want that type of outreach to be regional. There's another component of this that is related to fair housing and our obligation to affirmatively further fair housing. And that analysis a component of that will be specific to us. So some of that will be forthcoming from 21 Elements.
So I guess my suggestion, and the ad hoc committee should do with it what it will, is to try and get some rigor around what our perceived needs and challenges are, rather than relying on inferences on more regional. I think the regional issues that you've described are appropriate considerations, but it's still not looking at what the town itself also may need. And I think that could be very helpful context. And the only other point that I had is, and I think you'll be covering this in the future, but looking at the fact that now, Rena, you both have the overall number and you have the different tiers of income that have to be planned for. I'm not quite sure. As a general topic, I'm not trying to solve it tonight, and I don't think we will. But how do we know, or what is sufficient for the RENA purposes to know that we've got enough at the very low and low levels and all the levels? But because I would think that some of the allocation in those tiers has to come about through some, like, what are the criteria that would be applied in the absence of actually built housing and knowing exactly how a developer might or might not be allocating the units. So that, and I don't think we have a town-wide system to understand the actual use of the ADUs and the like. We might, for the affiliated housing, have more insight on income and how that's used to help us figure that out. But I think that's going to need to be part of the way forward. I'm sure the ad hoc, committee is out in front of me, but I don't know if you can speak to that at any high level about how the process is going to be played out to make sure we're meeting those lower tiers in particular.
Yes, I can speak to that at a high level. And that's one of the areas where the state law has evolved in recent years. So there are certain things that are built into the state law that they have assumptions around, things like the size of the property, the density or intensity of that usage, because people have studied and worked with affordable housing developers to figure out what are the constraints to affordable housing development. So they've tried to write the law now to build some of those things in, to remove some of the barriers for affordable housing. So some of those things come from state law that will be required to meet. And then there's some feasibility analysis that 21 Elements has assisted us with. So that will be part of that discussion. And then in regards to ADUs, you're right. There's a lot of questions around ADU methodology and how they're assigned to the different categories. So conceptually, what I anticipate happening is there will be a report that will be published by 21 Elements that HCD will provide feedback to. So we'll have an underlying assumption that will be acceptable to HCD. And that's how we will initially distribute the ADUs across the income categories. Then what I suspect we'll have to do, this is not confirmed, and this is I'm just projecting a little bit here. We have to talk about all of this. I would imagine that we'll have a housing element program that will talk about how we're going to manage ADUs in the future, how we might track them, how we might survey them, what types of tools are we going to put in place so that we have a better understanding of how ADUs are actually used. So that would be, at this point, I think that would generally kind of addresses that, and the ad hoc committee will get into a lot of the nitty gritty of these topics.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Council Member Sarah Wernickoff, do you have another question?
You're on mute, Sarah.
Just a super quick comment, somewhat in response to Commissioner Targ's comment. I just wanted to share that I haven't heard specifically or generally from anyone that there has been, lack of access and opportunities for the public to take part. And if there's a feeling about that, I would love to know personally. I'm pretty sure I speak for Jeff as well. These meetings that we and the other people on the ad hoc subcommittee, we've had about around 10 attendees from the community on each of the meetings. Typically some of the same people, but it hasn't been a broad group. And so, we invite everybody to join and participate in these meetings. And I also am certainly, happy to talk with anybody, one-on-one or in small groups. I just wanted to say that in response to your comments, just because, if there's a sense that there's not access, I personally want to address that. So that's all.
Thanks. Commissioner John Golden.
Yeah, I was going to move from questions into general direction and thoughts on guidance, if that's okay.
I think I would like, if we're done here, I will go to the public to take comments and questions. Then I'll come back and we can do that.
Okay. Yes.
Is there anybody else on the council or the planning commission who wishes to ask a question? Okay, I will move on to attendees. Sharon, are you calling on people or am I?
I'll call on them. Rita Gomez.
Hi, thank you for taking my comment. I participated in the meeting that was on the 14th. And as what was mentioned by someone, there were 70 people, 70 residents on that particular call. And tonight I see, thank you, Sharon, there are possibly 20 residents on this call, but the transcript of the comments that were stated by the residents on that evening is not available. Can those same questions, and it's the same questions, can those transcripts, those questions and answers that were done by the residents on that evening be added to the answers for this particular task, since it's the same questions? There's only 20 people here tonight, and there were 70 people, 70 residents on October 14th. And so it's a shame for information to be culled just from these 20 for the people that are willing to make comments. I don't know if this is making any sense. And but I think it's important that we include the 70 from that evening. Those are people that took time out of their evening to participate. And many people that participated felt that the reporting back when everyone was back into the large room was not reflective of what was said in the breakout rooms. Although the summary that Laura gave earlier did mention some of the things that were said in the breakout rooms, which were not reflected in the reporting out when we were all together on that evening of the 14th. So I'm just asking for the transcript of the answers and questions of the residents, of those 70 residents from October 14th, to be included with the comments from tonight. Thank you.
Okay, does that need to be addressed by either Laura or Jeremy?
Yeah, I would like to, thank you. We have a very detailed summary, many pages long. It's in final draft form. We just need to put some finishing touches on it and add some links to it, and then we will be publishing it. So it's very detailed. It'll be on the website, and it's very detailed list of the comments from the meeting of the 14th. We wanted to keep that separate from the comments from today because we recognize that the general residents may have a little bit different perspective than planning commissioners and council members. So we want to account for all those comments from the different sources so that the ad hoc committee and the public at large knows where the comments come from.
And if I may, through the chair, I participated as a moderator in the meeting last week, 2 weeks ago now. The meeting moderators had about a minute and a half to report out the substance of 30 minutes of comments from 10 to 12 people. So while I do agree that there's opportunity to always make that even stronger, I think it's also the best attempt to put out information in that kind of format. So I am sure that some people felt as though that their particular comments were not captured in that 90 seconds or 2 minutes. For that, I apologize, but I do think that there are limitations as it relates to reporting out from something like that.
Okay. Sharon?
Dale Fowl.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate some of the comments from the commissioners about the importance of the safety element, and I am going to reiterate that times 10. The safety element from 10 years ago has no bearing on the safety element that we're going to be dealing with now. Wildfire is an existential threat to this community, and it seems to me that any procedure, any efforts you're making on the housing element are useless until you see that housing element. I mean, the safety element. And I can't understand why you're proceeding with all this stuff without having that information in front of you. Number two, on the safety element, no one has reached out to the Wildfire Committee, the Emergency Preparedness Committee, or Don Bullard, the fire marshal, to discuss the safety element. And here we're already into the planning. So at this point, I have to say, I don't have a lot of confidence in your consultants if they have not begun to already reach out to the people who know most about our community and the particular issues that we're dealing with. So those are my comments, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Sharon?
Liz Babb.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for taking my comments and try to make them cohesive. First one is, it'd be great. Your presentation was fabulous, but could you please put your sources on the charts? It would be really helpful. Number two, I have looked at the ad hoc Housing Element Committee minutes, and they're very summary in nature. That's very different than I'm used to from other committee minutes. And I don't know why. I know, for example, the town council committee minutes are very detailed and super helpful when you can't make the meeting. So I would respectfully suggest that somebody look into that. And, if the person that's assigned to do minutes can't do them, let's get a committee member to do detailed minutes like all the other committees do. Number three, I attended the San Mateo housing meeting the night before the Portola Valley housing community meeting, and all of San Mateo was invited, and there were 85 people on it. And then the next night was just for Portola Valley, and there's 70 people. So it was awesome. I think that really shows how much the town cares. And as Father Martin was suggesting, listening and having meetings. So therefore, I'm super frightened that there's only two other committee or community
meetings that I saw in the presentation that are contemplated, that's just not enough. We've got to be meeting more and talking. This format's so stilted. We've got to have those breakout sessions were great. I mean, you've got to let the residents talk about this stuff. And again, 2 additional meetings is just not enough. And then SB 9 was brought up by one of you, and that's really frightening me because, if we want to, I know at the last town council meeting, you guys approved getting an urgent ordinance from staff to be discussed at this December 8th meeting. I also just heard that the home hardening ordinance is going to be, presented at December 8th meeting. I mean, that meeting is going to go on for 6 hours. So I think we've got to somehow get the community involved on this urgent ordinance in the month of November, or you guys are going to face a grueling meeting on the 8th. And then I wanted to point out some ideas. My understanding of reading on the Census Bureau website is that they are changing their definition of what is an urban community and a rural community, and that could really impact SB 9. And I think that we could be rural with the changes. I know we're not now, but we could be with those changes. So I encourage you to look at that, and obviously the town attorney to look at that. And then finally, I'm hoping that when the safety element changes and the housing element changes come about, that it's very easy to determine what was changed. And also that there's some type of review of how it affects the general plan. And because I'm worried there could be some real missteps and discrepancies in changing the housing element and the safety element and not looking at its impact on the broader general plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon? Oh, Sharon, you're mute.
I can't. I believe it's Carolyn Bertongan.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, it is Caroline. However, I would like to dedicate my minutes to people who are actually representing the ad hoc committee, who are residents who are on the ad hoc committee. So I thank you, Rita, for commenting on this. Again, I mean, yes, Laura and Adrian, you gave a wonderful presentation, but it's missing resources. We need to get back to this. I have sent an email. ABAC resources do not represent what we see here as residents in Portola Valley, and we would like to have more detailed information. Why you're not using the census? We need to know how ABAC got that information that you are using to present our demographics, because it doesn't seem right. I really thank the commissioners for their comments. It's not just fire safety, it's not the earthquake risks. We have so many more issues. And yes, I'm trying to be positive, and that's why we continue, because we do have solutions. But the town doesn't seem to be receptive to these solutions. It's a shame. Hopefully we can make them change, and we can do that, just like Father Martin said, with more listening and more communication. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Carolyn. Sharon?
Ronald Eastman.
Yes, hi. So I'd like to ask about what services 21 Elements is providing. It seems like, you're the Portola Valley Town Council, and you're the Portola Valley Planning Commission, and you're here to serve us. And so, and you are part of our community. So I'm wondering what, so I've heard that 21 Elements has not talked to our fire marshal. They've not contacted the safety committee. In what way are they going to, how are they going to find out what we need? Is this, how are they going to ascertain what Portola Valley needs? And what are actually, I'm just curious what services they're actually providing, what information, what advice are they giving to the ad hoc committee, and how are they directing the decision making? Because that's a little obscure to me. And all right, that is let's see, and yeah, that's my question. I'm sorry. That's what I would like to know.
Okay, thanks. Would someone like to address that? I'm not sure. Laura or Jeremy or Cara?
Sure, I could start and see if there others have something to add. The scope of work for 21 Elements is available. It's a contract that was approved by the council, so it is in a previous council packet. I'm sorry, I don't have that date in front of me, but you can see there the scope of work and we can share that with you, Mr. Eastman, if you'd like to look at that scope of work. The town has 2 different housing element consultants that we're working with on this project, and we have different areas of the work are with different consultants. 21 Elements is acting in terms of the collaboration of all of the cities, towns, and the county. That's how they got their name. 21 Elements is from doing 21 housing elements. This is the 3rd time that this group has worked together. It's become a model for how housing elements are created throughout California. And so it's an opportunity for us to collaborate and to share resources, and so that we're not all duplicating work of the things that are done in common. And the way that the state law is written, there are actually quite a few things that are done the same way for every community. And so those are the things they're helping us with, the things that are done the same way. And then staff brings the information from the council, the planning commission, the ad hoc committee, and the other people that we're in touch with, and we use that to inform that process. Then our other consultant, Urban Planning Partners, is working more on some of the community outreach aspects of it, helping us to prepare for the ad hoc committees, helping us to do the community outreach meeting because we're small. So we need help, takes a lot of people to put on these kinds of meetings. So that's the kind of support that they're providing to us. So you can see the scope of work for both of those contracts that council has previously approved.
Thanks. Sharon, I think there's one more hand.
Christy Corley.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I think anytime residents can learn more about the housing element and our housing plans, it's advantageous to those that listen to the Zoom later. So thank you. I'm thinking that the residents need a better definition, possibly of the committee of committees. That doesn't say much if you're just reading that. So how can you define committees of committees? Is that only for the Stanford Wedge project? Is it for all the large projects? Who's in it? Can you list everybody? Can you also, the ad hoc, if it's 15 people, can you make sure they're listed somewhere? And I am concerned if conservation was not included in maybe the ad hoc committee, because they go out to each building site to look at the environment. And as you know, I care about the environment. And I believe they've contributed to a lot of this town in making sure that we try to preserve our environment. So I would like to see a representative from their committee on that one. And then you have the subcommittee, the housing element committee, the ad hoc committee, the committee of committees. I just, please keep defining those for new people that come on to these meetings would be my suggestion. And how can the public be more involved in the agenda item planning? Yeah, I've seen at some council meetings at the end of the meeting, they do a call for agenda items for the meeting coming up. So maybe council would have ideas, maybe the public would have ideas, and then you guys go back and talk about it and decide what you want to do. But it allows us to also have ideas for future agenda item. How can the public be more involved in the development of the community survey? I think we have very smart, wise residents who have good input. And if you're considering a survey, please always suggest to put some public members that are not currently on committees to be involved as well. And then I know Commissioner Targ was wondering how to talk among yourself within the committees. And we are wondering as the public how to also have those larger talks about everything that has to do with housing. We want to bounce ideas off of each other. We want to hear it. We want more than 3 minutes. Let's see, I was noticing some of the charts ended at 2019, and I know the census data was taken for the US in 2020, and I'm wondering why we stopped at 2019 on some of those charts. And I think that's all of my comments. Thank you.
All righty, thank you. Are there any other attendees who have comments or questions?
There are no additional hands raised.
Okay, then I will bring it back to the panelists. This is the time when you can make general comments, give feedback to the staff. And if you would like to run through the 4 questions, we can do that too. Who would like to begin? Commissioner John Golden.
Yeah, so as I was going through the material for the meeting, I was thinking about what are the objectives that we're trying to accomplish here. And sometimes it's kind of useful to kind of do black and white, and I know nothing's ever black and white. But I was thinking of, so what are we trying to accomplish here? And at a minimum, I think we're trying to meet our legal requirements under RENA because we have to do, and the consequences of not meeting those are, they're not good. We don't want to be in that position. We don't want to be gaming it or getting close to it or saying, some SB9 will take care of it. No, we need to deal with it. But the other side of that is, what are our other objectives? We certainly have talked about as a town providing lower cost housing for a number of groups. I think previously it was identified as seniors, the young, the workforce. And if we really want to do that, then I actually think it complicates things a little bit. And not that this isn't complicated enough already, but I actually think that's the right answer. And I actually relate that back to what we tried to do with ADUs. We could have been just met the minimum of the law with the minimum size ADUs. But you know what? We didn't do that. We actually turned around and talked to the community and said, what would Portola Valley residents do with ADUs? And turned out a lot of public interest in doing things for family members and seniors and things like that. So we actually didn't do just the minimum. We actually did more than the minimum. We made them larger than was absolutely necessary under the law. And I think the reason that I bring that up is because as we think about how do we move forward and how do we identify sites and what programs do we put in place, which objective are we trying to meet? If we're just trying to get around the law, and minimize any impact on town aesthetics, then maybe you get into, let's take our large lots and allow 2 homes on them. And probably the current owners won't do it right away, but it'll get sold over time and gradually you'll get a new house, except it'll be a big expensive house. So it won't actually do anything for lower income or teachers or firemen or police officers. So it changes it around. It's like, so what do we do? Do we then say, those folks probably aren't going to be able to buy anyway. So then we have to think about how do we encourage rental units? And again, this is more complicated than just meeting our legal requirements here. It's like, how do we benefit the community? it gets into discussions around teachers. If you want to provide housing for teachers, the research shows that actually they don't want to live in your community. They actually want to live in the community next door. So that would require us to come up with some sort of a sharing plan with Woodside. Again, totally complicating the issue. But if we're trying to benefit the community here, then I think we have to look at this from a larger perspective and set us up for that. Other ideas that come to mind are, I'd love to see us work more with Stanford graduate student housing. If we want to set up, if we need to meet our RENA numbers, Stanford has huge numbers of graduate students that come in with families. That would be a wonderful addition to the community. Maybe that becomes a focus for how do we move us forward from a community in a way that meets our legal requirements, but actually goes beyond that and meets the needs of our community and maybe does some social good at the same time. So that was kind of my thoughts about how do we think about moving forward, really being talking about what our objectives are and what we're trying to accomplish, I think really helps guide our decisions about how we're going to implement things and what choices we might make. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Vice Mayor Craig Hughes.
Yeah, thanks for thoughts, John. I agree with you. I think, the least we need to do, as you say, is meet the legal requirements. There's going to be a lot of work involved in just merely doing that. But I think you're right. Beyond that, we need to think about, well, what are we doing here? Why did the state pass these laws? They're the set of laws. Why are the rules set up the way they're supposed that they are? And then, what do we want as a community? I think you mentioned a couple situations where, it's not just housing for teachers in our schools or people who work at town center or firefighters in Portola Valley that we need to be thinking about. We do need to be thinking about housing more generally. 99 of the 253 required units are essentially market priced houses. We've not built that volume of full scale, what you think of as a regular Portola Valley house in the current cycle, not even close to it. So that's going to be a big element that we need to think about. Where would you put, how would you deal with creating 99 new market rate units? I think we have what I think of as more invisible jobs in Portola Valley. Probably the majority of the employees in Portola Valley work in households or construction jobs, gardeners, maids, construction workers. And in a lot of cases, they may work here and also somewhere else. If you're a cleaning person, maybe you come once a week to a house and you then go and do a dozen other houses or more all over the place, not necessarily all in Portola Valley. Same for gardeners. Construction workers might work a couple months on a job and then go to a job in another town. So it's not just about housing the people that we think of as working in the businesses in Portola Valley. It's really about providing housing for the entire community, and that's I think a lot broader than we generally think. And as you say, people who work in this town may want to live not in this town. They might want to leave work at work and go live a little bit separated from that. I know, we've all seen this, I think, a little bit with COVID, being forced to work from home in a lot of cases. It's nice to not work in the same place that you live, at least some of the time. It's nice to, work from home too, but being able to, clear your mind on your way from the office back home. You don't want to do it in a 2-hour drive stuck in traffic. But a 15 or 20-minute break is actually a nice psychological barrier, and it helps you relax and get used to being at home and that being separate from work, I find. So, we want to not just, I think, provide housing for people who work in those things. It's really just a much broader community and really understanding that it's not just about below market rate housing. The RENA numbers that we're facing require us to build housing across all levels. including market rate. And that's what we need to really think about, is think about what do we want to see in terms of the town of Portola Valley? Do we want to continue having everybody who works here drive in and out of town every day? Or do we want to try and make that a little bit, more friendly for people?
Thanks, Craig. Councilmember John Richards.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, Craig. And I appreciate your comments, and you too, John Golden. I think the broadness of this issue is really something that we can't lose sight of. It's to me, the one thing that hasn't been mentioned much at all in this discussion has been the fact that the town, we're building for a community, and it's a community of it's had a great spirit of cooperation. It's had a great level of mutual support throughout the years. We've been a community as an incorporated town, and we've survived several really major changes in town. The development of the Blue Oaks and development of Portola Valley Ranch, and major physical changes. And people generally focus on those as the dangerous things that are coming with any new housing or any new kind of development in town. But we have survived it, and I think it's, I've been here through all of those, and people still love the town in spite of the fact that all these places have been developed within our borders. But I do think that we need to keep focused on the fact that when they want to come out the other end, and the last question on the list is really, to me, really relevant, that in 2031, we're looking back, we want to say that we've made it a better community and a stronger community. And that, I think, requires that we provide for the people who have had to leave because of the costs have gone through the roof, and that we have to be able to provide for the people who work here day in and day out in the less well-paid jobs that seem to be multiplying. And that's going to require, as John Golden said, some real complexity. And I think the ideas of reaching out to neighboring communities is great if we can make that work within the context of the state laws, which, as I understand at the moment, it's pretty difficult to do. But I think it gives us a lot of different opportunities to do things that can make this a much stronger community in the long run. And I think we should be not fearful about it. The question about whether we want to distribute housing through the community or concentrate it into some more concentrated areas, my initial reaction would always be to try to do more clustering, because that keeps the open spaces open more easily. But it's going to be a matter of case by case basis as developments are proposed, as people come in with ideas of where we might put these buildings. We're going to have to look at them on an individual basis and see how they can be put together. And I think we have some really good opportunity to do things in a way that will be absolutely in keeping with the town rules, with the town zeitgeist, and make it a better place in the long run.
Thank you, John. Okay, who else would like to speak? Commissioner Nicholas Targ.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I successfully unmuted myself. I would like plaudits for that. I was really moved by Councilmember Richard's comments and about the community that we have here. I tend to be a process-oriented person. And one of the things that the town has undergone in recent years is a change in form of government. And we have an opportunity, and I think we've heard that, and seeing 403 people sign up and 70 people come to spend an evening together around the housing element demonstrates a
really remarkable level of commitment to each other and to the community, and to seeing success within our little town. And to the extent that we can come out of this process and look back in 8 years and say, that was a really good process. That was a time at which some difficult questions were addressed and different voices were heard in a authentic manner and were addressed in good faith and openness, would be the kind of success that I'd really like to see from a form standpoint. And sure, so good planning talks about clustering. You also want to ensure that you have a wide range of housing in a allocated over a larger area. You want to be able to layer success on success to reduce fire danger, even as you're looking at issues of density. You want to address issues of trails and open space and access to the same, even as you're looking at further development, and to have those kinds of win-win opportunities, and also to be able to remove some of the stain that still exists on the paper that underlies our homeowners associations and perhaps the town, that says that people of color, of different faiths, of different occupations, of genders, are not welcome. And there are new tools that are available. We've talked a lot about, or mentioned, we haven't talked about it, but we've mentioned SB 9, but we also have 1466, which makes it easier to remove restrictive covenants and remove psychological barriers, to take the statues of segregation out from the gateways of our homeowners associations, as somebody once or recently said. So I think that there are opportunities to make us a more vital, more inclusive, more interdependent and cohesive community through this process that we're embarking on. But a lot of attention will need to be given to the issue of process, and a lot of mindfulness perhaps will need to be given to the participants, both those on council and planning commission, the ad hoc committee, and of course residents more generally. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Okay, I'm looking for hands. Commissioner Judith Haskell.
Thank you. I concur with Commissioner Targ on the importance of the process. I think if I want to look forward in 8 years, my best goal would be that we come out of it, as John said, in a stronger community, but also one that reflects the community values as best we can. And that's a lot of open space, preserving the trails, and being, very thoughtful about how we get there. It is a trait of the town that they try to do things in a particularly thoughtful way. And it's going to be pressured to be able to do that on the timeline that we need to. I mean, I'm just going to be honest about that. It's it's a balance between making sure the process is right and the community, which I love the engagement of, has multiple ways to weigh in. And I hear the planning director recite what seemed sensible levels of outreach. But it is really important. And, you know, if there's a choice between a little more process and getting heard, or more people getting heard, and being very efficient, I think we've got to be careful of hearing what the community has to say and being thoughtful about it in the Portola Valley way. In terms of the other questions that were posed, I personally don't feel I have enough information today to weigh in. I think these are questions that are too important to be driven by, you know, a personal opinion at this point. Maybe in the future, once we have more information, that will make sense to me. But right now, I just don't. I do think that one item that I've heard mentioned before, but not tonight, is the affiliated housing, and seeing what might be sensible to adjust on the affiliated housing. Are there more entities that should be involved? How would that work? That's a piece of this, because that could be, you know, addressing some of the people that work here and the few that may want to stay here. I do want to mention that there is a vibrant horse community in this town, and there are a lot of people who work in that community who need housing. So I would urge us not to forget about them. They're an important cultural aspect of Portola Valley. And I don't want to lose that, because it is part of what we are. And yeah, I think that's it. I mean, we have to, our goal should be a stronger community, and one that is refreshing itself and people's understanding about these issues. And I think we're headed in the right direction in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Okay, Councilmember Jeff Alves.
Yeah, I don't feel the need to weigh in at length on this, just because I'm on the ad hoc committee, and I'm really trying to hear as much input as I can, and hoping that the committee itself sort of takes some of this forward. I plan on relaying these comments to people. Looking at the list of questions, there are two that I haven't really heard much on, and one was just if anyone had any thoughts on what policies and programs have the most potential. And then the other was just this, you know, question of projects spread throughout town or projects in concentrated locations. I'm just curious if anybody who's not going to be on the ad hoc committee going forward had any thoughts they wanted to forward to them.
Craig Hughes, Vice Mayor Craig Hughes.
Sure. So policies and programs, I think, you know, we'll have to develop over time. I think, you know, we have some existing policies and programs in our current housing element that largely can carry over, or, you know, be adjusted for changing situation over the last 8 years. There may be some modifications to those, like adding members to our affiliated housing program, that kind of thing. And I suspect we're going to need some entirely new programs as well. As to the concentration versus dispersal, I think, you know, the safety element of that is an important piece. But frankly, looking at the numbers and looking at our current run rate of housing production, I think it's going to have to be some element of all of the above. You know, if you just look at the raw numbers, our current housing production rate for ADUs and houses gets us less than halfway to where we need to be. We're going to need to do our current rate of housing production plus roughly, plus or minus, a Stanford wedge size project every year for 8 years. And in order to hit those total numbers, I don't think it's going to be one or the other. I think it has to be both. We're going to have to continue and maybe increase ADU production. We're probably going to have to see some SB9 style, duplexes. We're probably going to have to see some larger projects that are more concentrated, where you have a dozen units on one, lot or set of adjacent lots, essentially. And so I think in order to satisfy the legal goals, as John framed it, the minimum that we need to hit, we're going to have to contemplate all of the above. In order to decide what does that mix actually want to fall out as, that's where I think we need to consider much more the elements of safety. What do we want the community to look like? Who's the housing? What's it going to be for? How do we get the mix of different income levels across the housing portfolio broadly? And it's going to be all of the above, I think.
Thanks. John Golden again.
So I was going to say pretty much what Craig was going to say, what Craig just said, which is, yeah, when you just, I'm not an expert on the numbers, but it's going to have to be all of the above, especially, I think, the legal side. We're going to have to do some of the fancy, okay, allow a second home here, allow a second home there to get us up to some numbers. But I don't think that solves, I don't think that gets us where we want to be as a community. I think we want to be more creative than that. I think we want to be a little bit broader. I think we want to, frankly, be a little bit more complicated to come up with something that actually really works for and benefits the members of our community. Let's find a place for the seniors. Let's find a place for the young folks. Let's find a place for the workers. We're going to be a better community if we do that, so, but I think Craig said it better, so I'll shut up.
Do other council members or commissioners have further?
Craig has his hand back up. Do you want to go, Craig?
Oh, is that a new hand?
It is, yeah. I just had a follow-up thought as well as to the programs and policies. One of my concerns, given the increased rate of housing production relative to what we've done, and I've mentioned this in the past, is a concern around our ability, or staff and the towns, from a government and a bureaucracy point of view, our ability to actually manage those construction projects, to be able to adequately review all of the applications that come in, to be able to supervise all of the construction projects that are going on, to be able to provide, supervision and oversight of whatever infrastructure needs to grow, whether it's more sewers, roads, traffic management, et cetera. Whether it's building inspection, if we have to have 2.5 times as many buildings being inspected as we currently have, we probably need 2.5 times as many building inspectors, unless there's some way to achieve efficiency there. And so as we're thinking through, especially this blend of distributed versus concentrated, the more distributed it is, the more it's going to be hard to avoid 2.5 times as many building inspectors. If it's a smaller number of bigger projects, you may be able to get some efficiencies where the planning review and the inspection and the infrastructure, it may be more complicated, but it's a smaller number of projects, and so it may be easier to actually manage that. So thinking about how we actually manage the process of having these houses being built and the work that the Planning Commission does on a regular basis, you guys are going to have 2.5 times as many meetings, or they're going to have to be 2.5 times as long. Modulo SB9 taking away your role entirely. But there's going to be a lot more work to do to handle this increased level of construction as well, from a number of people here, a number of people we're going to have to hire, and the public being involved in coming to the meetings to make public comment and all the rest of it as well. So that's an element that I think we shouldn't overlook as we're thinking through programs and policies.
Thank you, Craig. I've heard this argument before from you. Okay, John, did you have, okay, I see John and Judith. Are those new comments you
Yes.
make?
Yes, so yes, I was going to go beyond, again, building on what Craig had to say. What has been interesting for me, I've been in the community for quite a while, is we actually get less volunteer support than we used to. So Craig was talking about the need for building inspectors and, just because of the volume of potential building. But I actually think we're probably providing less support to the town staff as a community than we used to do. And there's definitely been a change there, and we see that in, the meetings. We used to have the individuals show up at the meetings, to ask about their project, but now we get the architect or the, whatever, some particular associate, or maybe the secretary showing up at the meetings to represent them, because housing has gotten so expensive that the only way you can live here is if everybody's working and there is nobody to show up at the meeting except the paid staff. So I echo the statement that there's highly likely, in my estimation, is that we're going to have to be working on town staff increase over the next few years and finding ways to pay for that.
Yep. Judith, did you want to make another comment?
Yeah, just a brief one. It's a bit of a counterpoint. I know today is an exploratory discussion and a guidance discussion. I appreciate that. I do want to observe that these issues are very sensitive, and when I'm for getting into an area that's very sensitive, my own philosophy is the more targeted you are on what you're trying to achieve, the more likely you're going to achieve it. And you do have a great risk of doing too many things all at once, between revising the general plan, revising the housing element, trying to solve for additional housing solutions, all of which are meritorious goals, but conflating them all, I think, is going to be difficult for the public to get their bearings around. And so I do think it's going to be very important to have objectives for each meeting, to the extent that makes sense, about why we're doing a given meeting and what it's connected to. Because I do think there's a lot of change going on. People are understandably disoriented, and it would be good to avoid kind of a firestorm of issues, when being a little more focused might help people be just be a little more comfortable with all the change. So I'll stop there.
All righty. It's almost 10 o'clock. I can see everyone's super antsy. There are 2 attendee hands up. For those who are new to the process, there is a time for the public to speak, and then that is closed. But if the body wishes, I can take those 2 questions. What do you wish?
I think one of the 2 is from someone we've already heard from. The other I'd be fine with taking.
All righty.
And we're always, as we always say, you can send your comments by email as well. We get those.
Me too.
Okay, then I will take a comment from Mary Hefty, because she has not spoken tonight. And I believe that's Caroline. You can send us an email. Mary Hefty.
Golly, okay, I'd forgotten my hand was up. You guys are so courageous. I just want to thank you so much. You're just hanging in there. It's really impressive. I couldn't help, but I've been reading a book that I've talked to Marianne about a little bit, called All We Can Save. It talks a lot about climate change, and about particularly about towns that are probably in environmentally useful areas, and how in fact they're really not the place for increasing density of housing.
I totally applaud the fact that we're getting a lot more services coming up. I think we've got a couple of great projects coming down the pike to make us slightly more diverse. But I gotta say that we should use our own resources and our own intelligence to make sure we don't put ourselves in the line of just putting a lot of housing into an area that's unsafe and not environmentally friendly. I know we've all been grappling with this, but climate change is real. These pandemics are real, and they're really a part of climate change. And adding our heating up, developing and carrying on does actually makes that problem much worse. So those are my thoughts. Just another perspective.
Okay, thank you, Mary. All right, I think I'm going to wrap this up. One thought I had was that probably 7 years ago, I never could have imagined having this discussion in Portola Valley. I am so heartened by the words I've heard tonight. And for me, in 2031, if I were to come back and visit Portola Valley, because I probably won't be living here then, I would hope that we had done something to dismantle the legacy of residential segregation. And that when I went down to town center, on a weekend, well, actually, that's not a good choice, because on a weekend, there's a lot of people from other communities. I went down to town center at the farmer's market. I saw all sorts of people, you know, as Judith said, the people who work in the horse industry, and people of different cultures, and people of different colors, and old people. That is what I would like to see. So thank you all. I think we have enough information for the staff. Am I correct, Laura? We're good?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so the next part of the night is our council liaison reports. Can some people leave who are not part of the council, or does everybody have to stay? Jeremy? Where's Jeremy? Oh, there you are.
A quorum of each body needs to stay.
Okay, so because I was going to suggest a little break, but if you'd rather just power through. Jeff, what do you want to do? Jeff often wants a break. Where is Jeff?
I'm here. I'm fine. We're close. I can finish up.
All right, I only have 4 reports, so that's pretty good for B, right? Okay, council liaison reports. Who wants to be first? How about you, Sarah?
Sure, I'll go first. We've talked about the couple of housing committee meetings that we've had since the last council meeting. One was on the 14th. That was the large community meeting, which was really kind of a 101 on the housing element. And we had great participation. As Rita mentioned, we had over 70 people on that. And it was really kind of the basics of housing and just getting some feedback from the community in breakout rooms. The second housing meeting was our standard monthly meeting. That was a really great detailed conversation for people who are interested. I definitely suggest you go check out the Zoom on that one, because there's a lot of kind of meat in detail. First kind of our first step towards getting to the context of what this is all going to mean. So I'd encourage people to check that out if they're interested. On the 19th, we had our quarterly finance committee meeting. And I am trying to remember exactly, I got to look at my notes here, actually. We spent again some time kind of talking about how many times we're going to be meeting, a year, and past that, as we saw at the start of this meeting here tonight, in terms of our charter. And then we reviewed the quarterly report, and there was nothing kind of extraordinary out of that. But it was nice to have, for the first time, a quarterly report to look at. So that was progress. And then the last meeting was Jeremy and I were invited to speak at the Sequoias to their, I think it's a monthly community meeting they have there. And we spent the hour with them. I think they had over 50 people on the Zoom, and, reviewed a lot of just kind of, it was an overview of the role of the town and how the town works and how committees work, and trying to kind of educate that population on different ways that they could get involved. And then we did go into, and Jeremy led this, a deeper dive on the housing element, as well as topics related to fire safety and evacuation. So that was a really nice meeting. I think that's it.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. What about John?
Yeah, I just had two. Well, I went to the Sustainable San Mateo County discussion of housing last week, which was interesting, very well presented. And then last night, the Conservation Committee meeting, where the committee discussed what thoughts they wanted to pass on to the ad hoc committee for upcoming meetings, and that was about it.
Okay. Craig.
Yep, I had a finance committee and trails. Let's see, at trails, new member Liz Babb was there for the first time. And then discussion of winter coming. This was ahead of the storm already, but talking about trail closures and how to deal with the winter as they generally do this time of year. Let's see, and then committee membership for the new year. So I believe everybody is re-upping for that. That was it.
All righty, and who am I forgetting? No, right, Jeff, I always forget you.
You used to call me first. Now you forget I'm here. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No worries. Let's see. Nature and Science met last Thursday. I was able to get part of it before our housing event. They unfortunately had to cancel Paul Heipel's Oak Galls talk, but he is trying to reschedule that. They are also working. They're trying to. They still like to do kind of an event around water, various aspects of water management, water, our watershed, and they were kind of. They were talking about trying to do, a presentation, both something in person. We were going to see how things go in the fall and winter, but they were thinking about that. That was sort of, I think they'd really like to do something in person for people at the town center around water in this case. Other than that, we had the ad hoc housing last Monday, the 18th, and let's see. Sarah summarized it well. It's a lot of detail, and I think we're really just downloading a lot to the whole committee to understand the kind of what a housing element's going to look like in this cycle, because it's actually even very different from the last housing element. And I think as we can all start to see what the shape of it looks like, I think we can start digging more into the details of what would actually go where. And as you maybe heard, there's we got some options and some estimates on how much housing they would provide. It's daunting. Even when we start thinking about fairly major things like rezoning of certain areas or multifamily in certain areas, it's hard to get to the numbers we're talking about. So I mean, it's a serious conversation. The safety thing. I mean, we're talking now about just the process to get to those numbers, and the safety thing really hasn't come into play yet, and it will. It's going to. It makes it honestly even more daunting. And so I think the committee is actually doing a great job, and they're really they're asking a lot of good questions. They've got a good attitude towards it. I will not lie, it's going to be difficult. And I think as we move forward, you'll hear more from us, and you'll hear that people are kind of grappling with this. But I think that the people on the committee are actually serious about getting the work done. So I do think we will be able to provide a good product. Other than that, I don't think I have anything else to report for this past 2 weeks.
All right, I had a Resource Management Climate Protection Committee meeting on the 20th. It was really packed. There was an update on the Bayren Single Family Residential Electrification Case Studies Project, which I think I had mentioned some months before, that Josie Gallard and Tom Cabot in Menlo Park got some money to do, I think, 10 case studies to electrify homes, different places in the county, different size homes. And they gave one case study. And what I thought was really interesting was they go in, they bring the consultant and they say, okay, you need to change out your gas stove for an induction. You've got to, change out your water heater for heat pump, that sort of thing. How about solar? They just make a list of things to do. They don't actually pay for the improvements. But in this case, and I think it was a house in Belmont. Was it Belmont? No, Redwood City, 1,900 square feet, 4 people live there. They have a 100 amp panel built in the 60s. They were able to accommodate all these changes and a charging station on a 100 amp panel. So I thought that was kind of remarkable. And I think this would be of real interest when we finally do the REACH codes, Jeff, because there's a lot of good information here for residents to show them that actually you can do this without having to underground your line. And I will actually double back to that when I do sustainability meeting. Then there was a presentation from 2 cities, Half Moon Bay and Menlo Park, who are farther down the road, and they are doing their single family residential electrification policies. Then there was a presentation on equity perspectives of single family decarbonization in the county. And I think this had to do with Habitat for Humanity's work going in and improving houses, but moving it over to energy improvements, which is real tough to do in some neighborhoods. Well, Joe. And then we moved to water. There was a presentation by a woman from the Sierra Club on their model water conservation ordinance. So this got into more of the one water with the gray water and the rainwater capture and the reuse of water from all wastewater and stormwater. And then we had a presentation from Bosca on water supply reliability, and they gave a dire picture of what's going to happen in 2 years. If we have 2 more drought years, we're going to run out of water if the Bay Delta plan goes forward. So it was quite political. And then Peter Dreckmeyer from Tuolumne River Trust was also there, who said, no, that's not the case. So it was a very interesting exchange. No matter who you believe, we do need more water supply in San Mateo County. From, as I said, the big wastewater to tap water projects or even to irrigation, all that sort of stuff. And then I had the Sustainability Committee on the 21st. They now meet on a Thursday night at 7 o'clock. Welcome 2 new members, Xenia Framrose and Jason Salah. They reported on their table at the picnic, and they were very happy to have had a lot of traffic and a lot of interaction with folks. They had the big, the portable battery and the portable solar panel, charging things up and running a toaster. They had Levy's book group, book suggestions. And so they were all feeling real good about that. What else? Oh, so the committee bought the large battery and the large solar panel. And so the idea is it will be in the library and people can check it out. So they're working with the library on that. Now, while we were having our virtual meeting, our new member, Jason, was in the garage because his family was too loud in the house, or maybe he was bothering the family. I'm not sure which it was. In any event, he showed us this amazing smart electrical panel he has called SPAN. Do you know about those, Jeff? Where you can, so he had his whole electrical panel replaced with this smart panel. He can turn off circuits. So like they're going out to dinner, they'll turn something off. You can turn off every circuit as you want. So this is what he did, because he was going to have to underground his line. And it, just like me, even though I have it undergrounded, it was done years ago. So it'd have to be torn up and a larger conduit would have to be installed. He can do this and just, decide what's going to run at what time so that he doesn't have to upgrade his panel. And he's on a 100 amp panel. What else? Then there was just a lot of, there's always a lot of banter, which I really like, mostly from Stefan, saying things like, why are they telling people to charge at night? Because you're not really supposed to. And they are going to put someone on this committee of committees, the Housing Element Committee of Committees. And I think so they talked a lot about that. And what else? I think that was it. Okay, I tuned into Housing Leadership Day on Friday, but I only was able to attend one breakout in the afternoon. But it was really interesting because it was talking about advancing equity in the housing element process. And there was a woman from Felicia Webster. I can't remember where is she from. She represents the disabled. And she talked a lot about how it is so hard for the disabled to get housing. I don't know what her organization is. So there was a lot of new stuff that I had really never thought about before that I learned. And what else? And they also talked about, there was a sort of housing element advocacy goals and strategies. And they talked about how personal stories are really effective, because when you can see the person who needs the housing, then you start to connect. Oh, right, that's not some anonymous weirdo who wants to move into our community. That's the woman who makes my coffee or cleans my house. Then I went to the Brisbane Library grand opening on Saturday morning. They use Siegel and Strain, the same architects who built our library, who designed our library and all our town center buildings. And it was really a great little library. I don't know if you guys know Brisbane, but it's right on the main street. In fact, it's right next to a dive bar, which is a little strange. So they just wedged it right in there, but it's beautiful. It has a gorgeous butterfly glass art installation. It has a little, a little outdoor area that's in between, I think, the maker space and the children's area. They have a giant rain tank that says rainwater. They have a little quiet room. So they just packed so much into that little urban space. And I did not go to my flood and sea level rise meeting because I did not have power. And that is that. Jeremy, you're up.
Thank you. Wanted to mention 3 things through the chair. Recently, the town put up on its website information about a series of wildfire related sessions that the Association of Bay Area Governments is sponsoring. This was an effort that I actually was involved in the inception of a number of months back. Talking to an ex-city manager out of the North Bay, and got involved in an informal discussion group amongst like-minded cities that have similar fire-related issues. And those discussions spurred this official working group that people can, members of the public can come and listen to. It's been quite nice. The ecosystem of people who are working on fire mitigation and housing issues is not a huge ecosystem, and been able to engage with some pretty remarkable people who are doing great work across different disciplines within the fire issue, whether it's radiant heat or evacuations or home hardening and the like. So I've been very appreciative of those conversations. And it certainly helps inform my thinking on the types of issues that we're grappling with. And as I have information, pass that along to the Wildfire Preparedness Committee. But those highly recommend people to take a look at that. They've been really great working sessions. Wanted to mention that the town, certainly from its public infrastructure standpoint, rode out the recent deluge, 5.5 inches of rain in town. That is a testament to the public works team led by Howard Young, Chuck McAllister, Scott Weber, and Justin, and his last name went around in my head, which is terrible. This is what happens at 10:30 at night. They busted their butts in the last month to get everything, Justin Bixby, to get everything going and get the town in the shape that it's in. And I am pleased to report we had no significant issues whatsoever. So if you are so inclined, please send them an email and thank them. I did that myself on Monday. Finally, have some interest from our friends with Little League to do some work on our batting cage. It's actually not ours, it's theirs. So we're looking to put together some kind of service day a little later this year where people can come out, paint it up, place the nets, that kind of thing. So I'm looking forward to that. I was glad that they reached out to us, and always happy to have those kind of partnerships with the community. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, I just wanted to put some context into why would Marianne be going to a library opening in Brisbane? Well, because the Portola Valley Library is part of a consortium of libraries that include Brisbane, East Palo Alto, Woodside, Atherton, and Millbrae. I mean, there's about 11 of us. Anyway, and I'm on the board. I see there's been a little hand up for a real long time. Ron Eastman, do you have something that you would like to talk to us about?
Oh, hello. I'm sorry. I thought I put my hand down, but so anyhow, I forgot what I was going to say, but I've been listening to you all. So anyhow, carry on.
Okay, well, if you remember, you can just pop it in an email and send it.
All right, I will do that. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. On to the digest. Thursday, October 15. Anything there you want to talk about? Okay, Thursday, October 21. All right. Well, then I think that concludes our meeting. Thank you so much, Planning Commission, for, if you're still here, for making it.
They have to be.
All this other stuff.
Exactly. Cara told us we had to be here, so we're still here.
We do a lot of things that are a little bit dull, but really enjoyed having you. And this was really a nice meeting. And I think having Father Martin begin the meeting made a big difference, which is why I am going to continue to bring people from the faith community if they would like to come. So good night.
Good night.